I Talked to Something Who Wasn't My Sister by Mini Damage 6313. So this is my first time ever writing anything like this, but I wanted to get some sort of closure for what I experienced when I was younger. For some context, my family and I, moved into our current house and the house this story takes place in when I was like 3 years old. It is a 2-story building completed sometime in the early 2000s. There are 3 bedrooms on the second floor. The master bedroom is to the left of this little walkway at the end of the staircase. Right next to it, on the right, was the room my younger sister and I used to sleep in when we were younger. And the last room, which was meant to be used as my younger brother's room once he got older, was all the way at the end of the hallway. But that room always remained empty and used as a storage room for the most part. When I was around 7 to 8 years old, I had developed this new schedule of after-school procrastination. I would shower and then sit on my parents' bed to watch PBS in my mom's bedroom. She had the biggest TV and by far the better graphics than the other televisions around the house at that time. It, being the TV, sat on top of a large drawer chest in front of her bed. My sister, who was a year and a half younger than me, would usually sit with me to watch whatever was playing. We particularly loved when Curious George came on, so we would always be out of the shower and dressed by 3:50, the latest, considering the show came on at 4. I'd never really felt anything off about the room, at least not when the sun was still out. But I always had this feeling about it once it became dark. It's a feeling I still get to this day as a 20-year-old. I just can't walk by it late at night without getting the heebie-jeebies. Something always felt off about it, especially when I was younger. I hated being upstairs by myself, even during the daytime. However, on this particular day, for whatever reason, I was up there by myself. It was around October, November-ish, and as a result, they were playing an hour-long special for Curious George. I honestly can't remember whether it was the Halloween or Thanksgiving one, but it was a movie sort of special. All I know is that I loved it enough to sit up there by myself and watch it. I was at least a good 15 to 20 minutes in when I heard a noise from outside the hallway. I thought it was my sister, so I ignored it. At some point, my sister came in and proceeded to stand right in front of the TV. My sister had this annoying habit of standing in front of any big screen and blocking the view for everyone. And while she wasn't really blocking my view, I knew my mom hated it when she just stood there. She said it was rude or something along those lines. Although in that particular moment, I didn't care. There had been this scene that was particularly funny that my sister had missed a part of, only getting to watch the other half. I began to tell her what had happened before, proceeding to laugh, expecting her to laugh too. But I didn't get a response, which annoyed me a bit, so I proceeded to say the same thing again. Yet I still didn't get a response from her. She stood still, glancing at the TV and away from me. Because I was on my mom's bed and the TV was right in front of me, all I could see was her back. The third time I got no response, I grew irritated, yelling her name and telling her to stop ignoring me, to look at me. That's when she turned around. Except it wasn't my sister. I mean, it looked like her, wearing the same clothes she'd been wearing earlier, same everything, but her eyes were off. All I remember was how unsettling the eyes were, being all pitch black, not to mention the emotionless expression aimed at me. We both stared at each other for a while before it turned around and proceeded to walk out of the room. I was still a bit wary, but then I got really angry because I was just blatantly ignored. So I got up and walked out of the room. I yelled for my mom, tattling that my sister, quote unquote, had just ignored me and left me talking to her, quote unquote, like an idiot. My mom's voice was confused as she yelled back that couldn't be possible. My sister had been downstairs with her the whole time. I asked if maybe she had gone upstairs at some point and she just hadn't realized, but she said no. And even if she had, she would have heard the squeaking of the floorboards that are right by her room. I was baffled, but thought maybe I had been seeing things. Yet after that, I didn't feel comfortable being in that room by myself anymore, and instead decided to stay downstairs with my mom for a while. I have experienced other weird things that just can't be explained, but I often think about this one instance and wonder what it was that I talked to that day. If anyone has any idea or guesses as to what I could have been talking to, please let me know. Strange Experience at Home by Demure Lion 47. I'm not someone who pays much attention to the paranormal or the like, but if anyone has any ideas what these events could mean or could even offer a rational explanation, would be appreciated. About a week ago last Friday, I was waken up at a few minutes past 3 a.m. to see my pillow in bed next to me being pulled away at a steady pace. At first, I thought it was falling off my bed, but when I pulled it back, it was still on my bed, flat. I grabbed my phone for the torch. This is also when I noticed the time. I've heard 3 to 4 a.m. is the time when most paranormal stuff happens. And I used an app on my phone to put my room lights on. I couldn't see anything, but maybe 10 to 20 seconds later, my cat in the hallway, who is normally very quiet, started meowing very loudly from the other side of my closed door. I went out to check, and she seemed fine. Once again, nothing was there. I kept my lights on low and tried to sleep, although I was super unsettled and was partially opening my eyes to scan the room frequently. Eventually, I fell asleep, but 2 hours later, I was woken up again, this time a few minutes past 5 a.m., to my upstairs hallway fire alarm going. I already figured this was something weird, so at first I stayed in bed, but got up when it wouldn't turn off. I opened my door, and as soon as I took a step into the hallway, it stopped dead. Nothing notable has happened since, but even a week or two later, I have a hard time sleeping as my guard is now constantly up. My mom, who I explained this to, also has a story from about a month or two ago. She was sat in bed reading, also around the 3 to 4 a.m. time. Crazy time to be reading, I know. And heard what sounded like an animal's footsteps running down the stairs. According to my mom, my cat, who was resting on my mom's bed with her, also evidently heard it and pricked her ears up and was looking about. Mom actually did go downstairs to check. We don't have a cat flap, and my cat was kept indoors at the time, so there were definitely no animals in the house. but found nothing. She described the footsteps as fast and light, similar to a dog or cat, and she believes it sounded like 4 legs, not 2. I've been thinking this over a lot, and I have a few theories. Personally, my mom has been watching loads of these ghosty shows, which I used to make fun of her for. And in these shows, the presenters tend to call upon spirits and all that likely staged BS. I wondered if the presenters trying to reach out to spirits might have actually encouraged something into my house, even though it was just playing through my TV speakers. We also had a big repair done, my bedroom floor, a couple weeks before, and I've heard structural repairs can disturb spirits, or something like that. Another thought I had is that after my pillow experience, my cat meowing loudly in the hallway must mean that whatever it was moved out of my room when I was looking around. The fire alarm also makes me think this was a conscious being, rather than just the spirit of, say, an animal. Like what footsteps might have suggested. Maybe separate entities, or something pretending to be an animal? My mom is religious, and I keep an open mind to these things, so we performed a blessing on the house, and nothing has happened again, yet. I also plan to install a night vision cam in my room and hallway in case things happen again. Any ideas, or better yet, rational explanations would be greatly appreciated. Thanks in advance. Shadow of a Crow in the Window by Persephone 114. I honestly don't know where to start. And I'm writing about it just because I want to know what that could have been. It goes through my head all the time. By the way, English is not my mother language, so I apologize for spelling mistakes. I come from Germany. 5 days ago, I woke up around 2 a.m. at night and saw the shadow of a raven on the ceiling from the window. My window doesn't have roller shutters because it's an old house and wasn't a bedroom before. We haven't renovated there since. The raven had a very long, thin beak, bent down, and didn't move. I didn't hear him either, even though my window was open. I could only see his shadow and this long, curved beak. That went through my head all the time, so I started to Google it. Here in Germany, ravens sleep at night, as far as I know. And this kind of raven does not exist here in Germany either. I then researched the internet and found out that there is a legend about a quote-unquote night crab, a so-called sandman who comes in the form of a raven and takes children with him who are still awake at night. When I saw the pictures of this night crab, I had such goosebumps because I had seen exactly this raven. I'm not a child anymore, but I still find it very scary. This happened 5 days ago, and I thought I'd share this story with Reddit. It's going through my mind all the time, and I don't really have anyone to talk to about it. I look forward to your opinions or answers. My Experiences, Part 1, My Childhood Home, by Nicholas Kaminski. My family have always been sensitive to spirits. I thought I might share my more intense experiences through the years, grouped by location. Here's the first, my childhood home. I'm soon to be 34 male now. Back when I was just over a year old, my mother and father moved in with my mother's parents. They had built a second-story apartment on my grandparents' ranch home in New Jersey. My mother still owns the home to this day, and I type this story now while visiting there for Memorial Day. The original house was built in the 1940s as part of a Levittown-style development for GIs. My grandparents bought it in the 1960s when they came here from Germany. As far as any of us knew, no one had died in the house ever. However, from a pretty young age, me and my brother, who is 4 years younger than I, would have odd shared experiences in this house. The most common one was a feeling of being chased up the steps to the second floor. Anytime either of us stood at the bottom of the steps, we both felt inexplicable dread and a presence behind us. But sure, just a feeling, quote-unquote, isn't an experience in itself. Tangible things began to happen after my parents divorced and my father moved out of the house. It started when my brother and I were sharing a room with wooden bunk beds. I had the top bunk. Late at night, after my brother would be long asleep, I would hear our computer, a late 90s desktop computer, typing. It would do this every night. I remember at the time not being scared of it, but rather just frustrated with the noise. Occasionally, I would ask whatever was typing to stop, and the sound would cease. One time, my brother and I were playing with our Hot Wheels in the room, and both of us saw a grotesque face appear in the wood grain of the bed. The face was legitimately terrifying, locked in a tormented scream. It appeared for a few seconds, but both of us saw it, yelled for our lives, and ran out of the room. We never could find that face in the wood again, or anything that even could resemble what we saw by making odd shadows against the wood with a flashlight. That was my catalyst for asking my mother to let me have my own room, replacing what was our den. When I moved out of the room, I mentioned to my brother the typing of the computer. He said he had never heard it before, and he didn't believe me. How could something happen in a room he slept in every night without him noticing? I shrugged, and once I was set up in my new room, he took the old top bunk, and our new rooms were complete. The next morning, I found the computer in the living room on the floor. The first night he was alone in the room in the top bunk, he heard the typing. That was enough for him to throw away the computer and never have one in that room again. I would also have a recurring nightmare that only happened at that house. A little girl, malevolent, would find me in the kitchen and laugh before attempting to stab me in the stomach. Later, the dream would include me desperate to find out who she was and why she was in my house. I would wake up in a panic from these nightmares, with the odd sureness that this was connected to the typing, the stairs, and the face in the wood. But who could it be? No one had died there. Eventually, my brother did some sort of pagan cleansing of the home, and the spirit never returned. It wasn't until long after I moved out on my own that I found out my mother had a miscarriage when I was little. She was having a baby girl. I wonder if the spirit of my never-born sister was angry and jealous that my brother and I got to live. The second spirit that gave us experiences in the home was my grandfather. As I mentioned, they lived on the first floor of the home. My grandfather wound up dying after a long battle with Alzheimer's in the house when I was 14. That left my grandmother living by herself downstairs. Generally, there was no activity related to him in the home, except when my grandmother would visit her sisters in Germany. These trips were infrequent, maybe every 3 or so years, but they would be lengthy, 2 or 3 months at a time. While my grandmother was away, boy, did my grandfather's spirit get active. He likely missed her and didn't know where she had gone. My brother and I took piano lessons from the guy Bob who would come over. One day, while my grandmother was away, I needed to stay late after school, so I told my brother to just take a double lesson, as I wouldn't be home in time. When I did get home, Bob and my brother looked terrified and asked if I was just getting in then. Apparently, during the lesson, both Bob and my brother heard a male voice speaking in the other room, as well as footsteps and a door opening and closing. They thought it was me, but indeed they were home alone. Bob was especially shaken by this. Another time when I was around 19, I was home alone and decided to take the opportunity to practice guitar extremely loud without bothering anyone else. I was playing and singing something when I heard clear as day my grandfather's voice, German accent and all, scream my name in admonishment like he used to when my brother and I would misbehave as children. I ran out of the house and drove away in my car, too spooked to even put on shoes. I stayed away until my mom got home from work. I guess I didn't realize my grandfather might not appreciate the loud music. Those were the big experiences that happened at that home, but little things like the piano playing on its own, footsteps in empty rooms, voices down the hallway, and items going missing only to show up in plain sight later were all common. Excited to share more with y'all coming up, including physically violent encounters, full-body apparitions, and a dark entity that turned my skeptic friend a believer. I spent a night at the Chelsea Hotel. Let's talk about it. By Worried Basket 23. It's been a few weeks since I've returned from my trip to New York City, and I think I've finally gathered some of my thoughts about my stay at the legendary and notoriously haunted Chelsea Hotel. Apologies if this is a bit all over the place. Mostly just wanted to share my thoughts and hear others' thoughts. A little background info for you. I've always had a huge fascination with this building and its history, so 5 years ago, while the building was still being remodeled, I dragged along some friends to see the outside of the building. I will never forget the wave of emotion and energy that hit me as I turned the corner and first saw it. I started crying and just felt a great sense of contentment. The following months and even years, I started having these bizarre dreams about the building, despite never having them before. Some were scary, some were just weird. As this isn't what this post is necessarily about, I'll skip detailing those for now unless someone asks. Anyway, anytime I described that first encounter with the Chelsea, I would explain it as a sort of energy trade-off. I'm not sure exactly what it would be called, but it always seemed like there was some sort of exchange of energy that day. Parts of me were terrified of the building because it felt very dark and heavy. There was another part of me that felt very protected and like it was balanced by the artistic and historical energy there as well. Point being, I ultimately decided that at some point, whenever the opportunity arose, I would spend a night there, no matter the cost. It seemed necessary in my head for whatever reason. The hotel reopened a few years ago, and I saw the cost and gave up at any chance of staying there anytime soon. A few months back, I was planning a trip to New York City for a different occasion and talked with a friend who was equally interested in the hotel's history about the chances of us splitting the cost of a room at the Chelsea. Long story short, it worked out. And before I get into these notes from my actual stay, I would just like to state that after my last experience with the hotel, I was expecting some huge experience and to be a little scared the whole time even. I haven't dove into it much, but there's always been some sort of connection with myself and the spiritual and supernatural. I am very impacted by the energy of places, and I've had a good amount of encounters with spirits in my life. All this to say, there was no huge encounter. There was nothing visually that I saw. I even at times felt a lack of energy, but back to that later. Calling it lackluster wouldn't be fair, but after years of building it up in my head, I felt mostly fine. And sometimes it just happens like that. So on to the things I noticed. I was in a 6th floor balcony room. The room itself felt sort of energetically empty, most of the time anyway. I didn't feel overwhelmed by any specific emotion or energy. It just felt like a fancy hotel room, which is nice, but not what I expected, given its history. As I mentioned earlier, the hotel has undergone significant renovations over the years. Walls torn down, lots of the inside of the building gutted and renovated to fit more of a luxury bohemian hotel of sorts, which as a history buff always kills me a little, seeing the drastic changes in places over time. All of this renovation made me feel like maybe the lack of energy in the rooms themselves came from the renovations, causing the spirits or whatever is there to feel confused and lack a sense of place. Which leads me to the next thing. The hallways and the staircase. While my friend napped, I decided to take the steps from my floor to the rooftop. I really wanted to get a sense of the vibe of each floor and just take it all in. The walls of the stairway are decorated with Chelsea Hotel-related art, some of which I believe is from former and even current residents. So it was at the very least worth a gander. But something I noticed was how full the hall and staircase felt, despite being empty. I really felt more on my toes, and like at any moment I'd be approached by someone behind me. I wondered if the halls and staircase remaining mostly the same as it's always been played a part in this. I think this is when I started to really get a feel for the energy of the hotel, the one I've heard and read so much. It was honestly a little overwhelming. And until typing this, I hadn't made the connection, but now seems like the right time to mention one of the dreams I had involved me walking the halls of the hotel. And for some reason, everyone was sitting outside their rooms, lining the hall and staring at me, almost waiting for me to talk. At the time, this seemed really confusing to me, but as I type this, it seems like the perfect description to what I actually felt. We ended up testing out a spirit box, which resulted in a few interesting interactions. A lot of activity, but much fewer clear words and phrases. One of the clearest things that was said was skin color. Note: friend and I are white, if that is relevant. This was really interesting to me, but I haven't been able to place this into a bigger picture. Other words I could make out at the time included hair pick, my name is, leap, multiple times, and I was wondering if this was connected to a woman who jumped to near death at the hotel. Be nice, Bailey, and bitch, leave. There was a spirit or two that seemed irritated with the contact, and others that seemed to want to talk, but we did take a break after that one. At some point, I heard my name so clearly through the box. My name is extremely uncommon, so this freaked me out. At some point, we poured some wine, and whoever we were speaking to was insistently saying, drink. I think they just wanted to be included in a way, so we made a toast to the former residents and the hotel's history. This seemed to please the spirits. I revised some audio when I got home and found some things we missed at the time. Stuff like listen, believe, etc. Something very clearly said blue, B-L-U-E or B-L-E-W. I heard this at the time and asked to confirm, which was followed by 2 more instances of blue, which I did not hear at the time. As a literature nerd, I was curious if any of my favorite writers were around. Obviously, interacting with dead celebrities is way less common than the average person. However, for what it's worth, when I was talking about writer Herbert Huncke, something came through and said, I'm here, and hello, which I thought was sort of amazing, regardless of who it was. The names Anna, or maybe Hannah, and a possible Emma, although I'm wondering if this was possibly just one woman with one of those names. Anytime I would try to talk to anyone about the Titanic survivors who stayed at the hotel upon docking in New York, there seemed to be an agitated or even angry energy, so I tried to leave that be. There was definitely at least one child present, but I couldn't make out anything specific. Toward the end of our final session in the room, there was a shift in energy that felt negative, which I can deal with. However, this felt beyond that, so I chose to end there. Upon checking out, I tried the spirit box briefly in the lobby, and there was far less activity. I also checked it out at my other hotel later, and there was virtually no activity. I, at some point, ran to the hotel's bathroom after checkout, which is in the basement. The energy down there was similar to what I felt with the dark energy at the end of that session, so I'm thinking this could be connected in some way. I also heard the door to the bathroom open, but no one walked out and no one walked in. This could be explained, though, but worth mentioning. And that's basically it. I'm really curious to hear if anyone can make any sense of this, find connections maybe I haven't, maybe have had their own experiences at the hotel, etc., etc. Sorry for such a long-winded post. What Made You Believe in the Paranormal? By Fizzy. To preface this, prior to this event, I was a hardcore atheist. I didn't believe in any afterlife or anything paranormal. My view has changed pretty dramatically now. I don't know what I believe, but I know that there is something more than meets the eye. I had something happen that I can't explain. I had a very large kidney stone. It's pretty routine for me. I get them a lot, so we went ahead and scheduled a surgery. They broke up the stone with a laser and put a stent into my tube to help the fragments pass. I was recovering at home when my temperature started rising, and I started having pain worse than anything I've ever felt. I took pain medicine, and it didn't help at all. I sat there for several hours, kind of delirious with pain and fever. My husband had to work the next morning, so I told him to go to bed. I figured I would be fine, just needed to get through the pain. He had been in bed about 15 minutes when he comes back into the living room and asks what I want. I was totally confused and asked what he meant. He said that he had heard me knocking on the wall and wanted to know what I needed. I told him I didn't knock, and he should go back to bed. He did. I sat there for a while longer, but started getting really nauseous. I was also thinking about him hearing knocking. I'm not normally superstitious, but something about that just felt off to me. So I decided to go to the ER. I got him up, and off we went. After a long series of tests, they discovered that I had a staph infection, blood poisoning, essentially, probably caused by a stent that had been contaminated. They gave me an IV bag of antibiotics and some stronger oral antibiotics. They couldn't admit me because my specialist didn't have admitting privileges with that hospital. They suggested that I go to the hospital where he had admitting privileges. I didn't really want to do that, so I went back home. That's when the knocking began in earnest, all over our house, inside, outside, different areas of the house, for 2 days straight. The entire time, I ran a high fever. My fever stayed right around 101 to 102, and the whole time, knocking. It was so bad that we thought someone was messing with us, but if someone was messing with us, how were they able to knock on the bedroom doors and inside walls? I am a very, very skeptical person, but I cannot explain it. We both heard it all over the house. Well, 2 days later, my fever broke, and the knocking stopped. We have not heard it a single time since. I don't know what happened. All I know is that it has made me reevaluate everything I thought I knew. Work and live in the rural Midwest outdoors. There are things that live out here with me. By Oogerooger. I'll start this off by saying I grew up completely 100% adamant that the paranormal isn't real, it can all be rationalized, and that people who believed in it haven't thought about it hard enough. I've made other posts on other subs about paranormal events that have happened in my life recently that have completely changed my mind. Primarily about my neighbor's house. That's not what I'll be talking about today, though. I live in the Midwest. I live on a small rural lot between a cornfield and a small forest in a camper. I've lived in this county my entire life. I know the entire county like the back of my hand. This being said, I've come to the conclusion that my experiences around the rural and wooded parts of this county are crawlers. I'm 100% sure of it. I've had many encounters, actually. None back to back, but they happen frequently. There is a forest or park in the middle of the town I always hated at night since I was little. As I got older, my cousin and I thought getting scared was really fun. We'd go there at night on purpose, but never lasted long. I always felt like I was being watched. This, on top of urban legends of people going missing here at night, made me feel really uneasy. Fast forward to a few years ago. I got married and am settling into life as a husband. I'd take my large all-black German Shepherd, Fenrir, on walks with me at night. I always walk towards the park, but I usually don't enter into it. The first time something weird happened was 5 years ago. I was walking Fenrir, and the woods to the front and to the right of me, to the left and behind me, was a neighborhood edge and a small playground, went silent. My dog started acting super anxious. He's usually a very stoic and quiet dog. He's 120 pounds and built like a tank. Looks very intimidating, and he knows it. I heard rustling in the woods following me, and I felt like I was being stalked. I ran home, and that's the end of the first encounter. I had a few more encounters like that, but last year, things really amped up. I was on a walk around 11:30 p.m. with Fenrir, my wife, and our little newer dog, Booger. He's a terrier chi mix. We are walking down the same path, and about 3 blocks away from the woods, 4 or so deer are sprinting out of the trees into the street towards us, and they seem terrified. Then I can hear what I can only describe as what sounded like a human trying to mimic the sounds of a monkey. I thought it was silly until recently, when I read that other guy's story who heard the same fucking thing. We laughed it off as some kids playing around. Once we got up to the woods and were walking parallel, we can clearly see 2 reflective eyes and a silhouette staring us down from the tree line. We also heard a deep growl and then like a hissing sound. But it wasn't super high-pitched or anything. Both our dogs acknowledged this as well. Fen stared and Booger growled a bit. I made a Facebook post on the community's Facebook group, and other people told similar stories around town. Around this time, I got a job as a tour guide or maintenance for rail explorers. I am working there again this year as well. We start April 1st. Basically, they take unused or tour-specific railroad sections that aren't used federally, and then they have these pedal carts with motor assist on them you can use to explore the tracks. It's super cool and super fun. The one I work at is like 5 minutes from where I live, and it goes through the woods in an inaccessible part of the county, unless you float down the river and hike up steep, loose dirt hills. You go under one old car bridge, and you go over 2 multi-100-foot-length old train bridges. The first one is larger and taller, and it's about 150 feet off the ground above the forest. The second goes over the river. About 6 months into the job, and it's fall. We work until midnight sometimes, with the last tour leaving around 9 p.m. That means the last tour for the last 2 months of the year are in complete darkness. The way that job operates is with 6 employees. 4 get on the lead bike, and 2 get on the rear bike. From the lead bike, we drop off 1 person at the busy intersection so they can flag traffic, and 1 person gets dropped off at the large train bridge that goes over the woods. The person at the bridge gives a short safety speech to the customers who stop and go one at a time over the bridge. The employee carts are much faster than the customer ones. We all have walkie-talkies, and we usually have these battery-powered floodlights on stands we use so the customers can see us, and light up safety vests. On one particular night, we were behind by 20 or so minutes. Instead of leaving the depot at sunset, we were leaving at dusk. I was stationed at the high bridge. By the time we reached the bridge, it was pitch black, aside from the stars providing a little light. My coworkers dropped me off and waited with me until the first customer arrived. I gave the little speech to the first cart of 4. I chatted with them a little bit. I was trying to buy some time and wait for the next customer cart so there wasn't a massive gap for my coworkers who have to flip the bikes around. After a few minutes, I let these customers leave, and I was alone. I was alone for 20 minutes. I used the radio so many times, but it was static for everybody. One of the only times we've ever had an issue like that as well. I kept seeing movement in the tree line. I kept hearing fast footsteps all around me in every direction. I had the floodlight on above my head so everyone and everything could see me, but I couldn't see shit. I turned off the floodlight and used my personal flashlight. I kept seeing quick glimpses of pale skin moving quickly, but right when I started seeing stuff, I could hear the next customer cart coming close, so I turned the light back on and waited for them to come around the corner. When they pulled up, I noticed they had a little boy with them, and he's scared of the dark. I'm terrified at this point, but have to act appropriate, even more so because of this boy. I do not want to scare him. As I'm finishing my speech, I hear movement right behind me and say, "Jesus fucking Christ," and spin around with my flashlight on instinct. Poor kid. I told them it was probably just a deer, and they're good to go across the bridge. That same night, the person stationed at the intersection, this isn't like an in-town intersection, it's very rural. It's right next to a massive cornfield. He's Native American and was very in tune with his culture. He told me privately a few weeks later that he heard rustling in the cornfield, and whatever was out there was whispering his name and trying to get him into the field. He was also without communication for those 20 minutes, but he wasn't in the woods and could see a lot better than me. Another time, me and that same coworker were headed back on the front cart. We were away ahead, so we stopped the cart in the middle of the high bridge. It sounds scary. I'm a bit afraid of heights, and this bridge has massive gaps between the planks you could fit through. But after doing it so often, you get used to it. It was a clear night, and we were watching the stars and having small talk. Then it goes silent. We are 100 and so feet in the air above the woods. We can hear for miles. The dogs barking across the river 2 miles can be heard without even seeing the houses. We hear what sounds like a human mimicking a monkey noise. And we hear growling. He looks at me completely seriously and tells me in a stern tone that we need to get out of here right now. I drive the fuck out of there, and he moved states to Nevada shortly after this. A few other things happened here and there, and to coworkers as well. Each of my coworkers have at least one story. I'm only sharing mine in this post, otherwise it'd be too long. A few months go by, and it's late fall, around the middle of November. I drive through that park in town a lot when I just want to go for a drive. I had my dog Fenrir with me, and it's around 2 a.m. I can't sleep, so I'm listening to a Melvin CD and driving leisurely through the park. As soon as I get past the entrance gates, I feel really uneasy and weird. I'm not easily scared. Going to that park at night makes me feel a primal fear. It's beyond fight or flight. I have never felt that way in my life anywhere else, ever. And I feel it every time I'm there. I'm driving through the park and I've rolled the windows up a lot more. Fenrir can still poke his head out but can't leap out. As I go deeper into the woods, I feel worse and worse. I decided not to turn around, because I'm already past the halfway point. Turning around would just make me stay in the woods longer. I started speeding where there weren't turns I couldn't see around. I round the last corner, and what I saw made me have nightmares for months. There was a pale, skinny humanoid, tall and lanky, not quite human, fucking crawling on its hands and feet, but it was crawling fast as fuck, 20-mile-an-hour type shit. We don't have bears here. The only animal that size are large humans and deer. That wasn't a deer. It went from my right, crossed the street, and went into the tree line. Fenrir saw it too. He doesn't bark at animals, not even other dogs. He went ballistic. He was trying to force himself out of the small gap in the window, nearly foaming at the mouth and snarling. He never, ever acts like that. I'm a certified dog trainer, and I've raised him from birth. Most recently, I've become obsessed with this park. I've walked there at night from my camper to the park with Fenrir. I'll never do it again. I didn't see a figure this time. As I was entering the park, a massive owl flew by my head so close I could have smacked it mid-flight. This made me feel weird for some reason. As soon as I get into the park, I feel extremely weird, anxious, and nauseous. I walk a few hundred yards to the only street light in the entire park, and I turn around and face the woods. Me and Fenrir stand there, frozen, for like 10 minutes. The silence was deafening. Anytime I heard something, I'd jump. Fen was anxious as hell too. He kept staring into a certain part in the woods a ways off. I swear I saw eyes in there every once in a while. I built up the courage to walk out, and I haven't gone back since. It'll be interesting to see what happens at my job this year. I wanted to add that the county I live in is packed full of abandoned mines. Hundreds of them. Untitled by Anonymous. Sorry for the long post, but the backstory is necessary. I work overnight as an RN on a pediatric ICU floor. Most of our patients are sedated, paralyzed, tracheostomy and ventilator dependent, etc. One side of the floor is where our acute trauma kids go, severe accidents, drownings, etc. And the other side is where our chronic kids go. These are usually the kids that are termed our frequent flyers. When they're not in the hospital, they live at a facility that provides 24-hour medical care. Once they get discharged, it's only a matter of time before they're back, usually 2 to 3 weeks, usually due to respiratory failure. Most of them do not have parents that visit or call. They just lay there staring at the ceiling and get their medications and tube feedings. It's very depressing on that side. One of my patients was a chronic kid. She was 5 years old. Her medical history was incredibly complex. She was trach and ventilator dependent. She was delayed, but she was with it, so to speak. Every time she was readmitted to our floor and I had her as a patient, she would smile the biggest smile when I'd walk in at the start of my shift. I made it a point to sing her songs and make her smile. Since she had a trach and was hooked to the vent, she wasn't able to make noise. So when she would cry, it was silent, and you would just see the tears streaming down her face. She absolutely loved the movie Frozen. It always made her stop crying. If I would walk in and the movie was finished, she would tug on the sleeve of my scrub to play it again, and I would. That was our thing. I didn't mind being on the chronic side as much when she was there. I care for all of my patients, but she held a special spot, and I believe she knew it. She was discharged back to the medical facility she lived at. It had been a while since she came back this time, maybe 2 to 3 months. But when she did, she looked bad. Worse than ever. She required way more oxygen than her usual baseline this time. She had lost a lot of weight. She was already very small for her age. Her eyes were sunken. It hurt me to see her that way. I did my dances and my songs, and she didn't smile. I would talk to her and she wouldn't react. She wasn't really tracking and following with her eyes. She wasn't herself anymore. She was clearly deteriorating. This was expected due to the multiple congenital issues she was suffering from, but still, it was hard to watch. She was there a few weeks and her prognosis was pretty poor. My last shift with her, she was hardly able to raise her arm, but she did, just to tug on my sleeve so I could put Frozen on. So I did. It was otherwise a regular night. I went home and slept and woke up just in time to come back for my next shift. I was expecting to get my same patient assignment, and I saw I had the same room number, but the name was different. There was someone else in her room. I asked what happened, and their faces all fell as they told me she had coded in the morning, and they weren't able to get her back. She passed away. I wasn't there. I was totally devastated. I held it together and I didn't cry, but this shift had a heaviness to it. I was really sad and just felt like I was drifting from room to room the whole night. Fast forward to 3 a.m. I needed to go into that room to start the new patient's tube feed. There was nothing on the TV, but the patient was awake. I put on the movie Coco, so he would at least have some background noise. As I was starting the pump, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I had goosebumps down my arms. Just as I was about to turn to leave, I felt it. 2 tugs on my sleeve. I froze in place. At first, I felt really afraid, but then I got the most overwhelming rush of emotion all at once. I ran to the bathroom and I cried so hard. It took me a while to gather myself. I splashed water on my face and went back to my desk to chart, trying to shake off what had happened and just tell myself it was impossible. My grief was causing me to imagine things. At 4 a.m., exactly 1 hour later, the feed was done. I went to the room and I paused at the doorway. Frozen was playing. I had only put Coco on 1 hour ago. It couldn't have been finished. I stood there in disbelief. I've never really had anything paranormal happen to me before. But in that moment, I had the warmest feeling. I just knew she was trying to tell me she was okay or something. I can't explain it, but it made me smile. I've been in that room plenty of times since, and nothing weird has ever happened again. It only happened that one night she passed. It's almost like she was saying goodbye. And I'm glad. I would be sad if even in the afterlife she was confined to a hospital room. I like to think that wherever she is, she's free to walk and laugh and watch Frozen on repeat. What did I see? Repeated sightings, interacting with me more. What is going on? By Oogerooger. I had some more weird shit happen last night. I took my 2 dogs for walks. I normally walk Finn, large, all black, German Shepherd, toward the park where I have had these experiences, and I walk Booger, Chi Terrier mix, the other direction, toward downtown. On my walk with Finn, about a block away in the direction I was headed, I saw 3 or 4 deer calmly walking toward the park. Most nights where something weird happens to me start like this. The deer seemed completely unbothered by me as I approached. They kept walking toward the park but stopped every few steps to look back at me as if they wanted me to follow them. Then as Finn and I reached where the deer were, I noticed about 10 or more other deer waiting as well. They all start walking together, calm, but still looking back at me every few feet. On my way toward the park, I smell the stench of rotting meat. I know the smell very well, as I used to be a butcher. It was strong. Like someone plugged my nostrils with rotting ground meat or something. At the same time I smell this stench, I get the chills. Finn's hair stands up and he gets more nervous. I can feel the air around me get colder. As we continue walking, I look down an alleyway that cuts the block in half, and if you would walk down the dark alley, would spit you out where I eventually walk back home. I was 2 blocks away from the park. When you reach the park, you can either turn around and walk down the same road, you can continue into the park, or you can continue on the road, which turns left. Looking down that alleyway, you are looking at the part of the road that continues left, which is the way I take every night on my way back home. What I saw, I tried to convince myself wasn't real. Or maybe I just saw something else and my brain tried to convince me it was this. A large, muscular, pale, hairless creature that was moving fast, so fast I could barely see it. I saw the motion down the alley about 2 blocks away. The exit of the alley on that side has a street light directly above it. It wasn't standing still, it was moving, and it was moving fast. The only reason I'm positive what I saw wasn't deer or something normal is because of something I saw later that night that I will write about when I talk about my walk with Booger. It solidified that what I saw was something I was not supposed to see. In the meantime, I convinced myself I was making stuff up and being a pussy. As we approached the tree line of the park, the large group of deer moved to the side of the street where the neighborhood is, while I'm on the side with the tree line. I noticed something in the clearing. A lone deer, separate from the large group across the street, staring directly at me. I have my flashlight pointed at him, and I even hung up my call with my wife to use my phone to take video of this moment. This lone deer doesn't even have the micro movements from breathing. The other deer across the street were constantly readjusting. You might be thinking to yourself, oh yeah, deer do that with bright lights shining at them. Deer in headlights always act like that. Just wait. Finn starts to pull very hard and acts anxious, nearly knocking me over. I turn to look across the street towards the large group of deer for at most 3 seconds before quickly turning around to face the lone deer again, In those 3 seconds, that lone deer is easily 30 feet closer to me, still not moving, staring directly at me. I have this on video. I have pictures. I felt weird. I felt unsafe. I've lived in rural Iowa my whole life. I am and have always lived outdoors. This didn't feel normal. I was scared. I back away while shining my light at the deer. Once I get a block or so away, he finally turns around and calmly walks into the tree line. The whole way home, I feel like I'm being stalked, not just watched, but like something is following me. Now, I went home and sat for a bit and tried to talk myself into believing it was all coincidence. After nearly 20 minutes, I started to walk Booger, my smaller chi mix. The entire walk was nice and very enjoyable, actually. I had my earbuds in and was talking to my wife about what I saw in a joking way. "Man, I'm such a pussy. I really scared myself for no reason," I said. At the end of the walk, I turned to go down our alleyway as I leave from the garage on our walks. I stopped speaking from what I saw on the opposite end of the alley. My wife heard me stop. I want to preface this with I did not have any substances, including alcohol, for weeks up to that point. The most I ever do in that department is a few beers, or I'll use some weed to ease anxiety if life is getting hard. I have no mental conditions that will cause me to hallucinate. The most I have is a personality disorder resulting from trauma that I've been overcoming quickly this last year. I saw 2 large, muscular, pale, hairless creatures walking like apes at the end of the alley. The same thing I thought I saw with Finn, this time not going fast, much closer, and it felt intentional. I saw them walk across the street very slowly, staring directly at me. These were not deer. They didn't have long faces like deer. They didn't have fur or tails. They didn't walk like deer. They weren't slender like a deer. My first thought was honestly that I was looking at 2 hairless male lions in the middle of Iowa. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, well after they had left my sight. 15 seconds later, I finally get the courage to walk the few feet into the garage. When I take my first step, I see a third one, slowly meandering across the street, staring at me. Booger noticed him too and started growling. I ran to the door and watched the garage shut all the way. The entire night, Finn guarded the bedroom door. He never does that. He sat staring at the door all night. Booger stared at the windows all night. He never does that either. This happened to me yesterday night, Monday, May 13th, 2024. I don't know what to think. Encounter with a Black-Eyed Kid by Adeewun. During the winter holiday season of 2021, my partner and her son left the country to visit her father, so I was home alone with the cat and the dog. The entire day of the event was filled with strange occurrences. One example being, I walked past the front door on my way to the washroom. I looked at the door as I walked by, and it just opens by itself. So I closed the door, thinking to myself how strange the timing was. I make sure it's securely closed by trying to open it without using the handle. It doesn't budge. Satisfied, I head to the washroom and do my thing. Walking back from the washroom to the rest of the house, I pass the front door. It's open. The fucking door has opened itself, and this time the dog is barking at it. I tell him to relax, and usually he would. Not today. He finally relaxed after a few minutes of ear bleed. Fast forward 2 hours, around 1830 to 1900, and it's a nearly identical situation in that I walk past the door, close it, test it, head to the bedroom, come back to the house, and it has opened again. Dog barking again. Yada yada. Another 2 hours passes, 2100, and I'm in bed when the dog starts in again. I immediately check the front door, and thankfully it's closed. This happens every 2 hours until around 4 a.m. At 4 a.m., I'm woken by the barks, accompanied by 3 hard knocks at the door. My blood is coursing, heart about to beat straight through my chest as I look through the window to the left of the door to see who is there. There he is. A 10-ish-year-old indigenous-looking boy standing there in a jacket, wholly unremarkable in appearance, until I look for his eyes under his hood in the dark of night. Completely black from eyelid to eyelid. The conversation went roughly like this. Me, door still closed, talking through the glass. "What's up, little man?" Him. "I'm so cold. Can I come in?" Me. "Where are your parents?" Him. He just stands there, silent. He has this eerie fake smile he's showing me while just kind of nodding. He evades the question and again talks about how cold he is. Me. "Do you have parents, dude? It's 4 a.m. What the hell is going on? Are you okay? Where are your mom and dad?" Him. Shrugs. I tell him I can't let him in because I had COVID. I didn't end up getting it. I still wasn't convinced this wasn't a home invasion type scenario. I run to the bedroom, grab my cell phone, and dial 911. I give the dispatcher my name and address while walking back to the front door and start describing the kid. This takes maybe 15 seconds. When I get back to the front door, he's gone. I throw the door open and run out to the street, but he's gone. There's nowhere he could have gone that quickly. We live at the top of a cul-de-sac. That's basically it. I looked for my neighbors with any cameras attached to their homes and asked if they had captured anything. Only 2 homes on my street have cameras and neither got anything. One of the homes with a camera is across the street from us, and while she didn't capture any footage, she said she saw a kid walking the neighborhood a few days later in the early morning hours as she left for work. But when she got to where she saw him, he was gone. What Made You Believe in the Paranormal? By Coyote. I mean, I've always seen and experienced weird things since I was little. I saw Grandpa at his own funeral, standing right beside Grandma with his hand on her shoulder. After a minor house fire that damaged the second floor, I heard someone opening and closing my brother's dresser drawers late one night. But when I sneaked upstairs to see who it was, all I found was every drawer pulled out of the dresser and laid on the floor. There was an old abandoned house across the street from ours, with no floor for the second story. But sometimes at night, I would see a light on upstairs. All the neighborhood kids called the house the witch house because it was just weird and apparently always had been. When we moved out to our new house in the country, things really kicked into overdrive. The first night there, the whole family heard a loud bang, like something heavy being dropped on the kitchen. But when we went to look, nothing was out of place. Shadows would walk behind us and our reflections in the windows. Footsteps would pace back and forth across the roof at night. I saw a full-body apparition of a girl my age, and she saw me. You had to draw the curtains after nightfall because of the overwhelming, powerful sensation of being watched by something out in the woods around the house. My apartment in college had a poltergeist, and multiple people observed its activity and was also haunted by several small, black, cat-like entities that we could only see in my roommate's curio cabinet mirror. Once, when I was home alone during spring break, I was in the bathroom when I heard the vanity cabinet doors opening and closing. I thought it was the kittens at first until the door handle started to rattle up and down like someone was trying to open it from the outside. This escalated to the whole door shaking violently for several seconds until it abruptly stopped, at which point I ran to the living room, grabbed the kittens, and hid in the bedroom with them for the rest of the night. The apartment I lived in with a friend several years ago had at least 2 separate entities. A small, white, childlike entity and a large, shadowy, angry man. Both of them were confined to the hallway and the master bedroom. The women's shelter was haunted by a teacher who had committed suicide when the building was still a school, a handful of spirits, and at least 2 extremely malevolent entities, one of which was attached to the now former executive director, and which took the form of either a cloud of static around him or a giant black dog, again which was witnessed by multiple people. The flop house had shadow people who lurked the hallways after dark. And while my current apartment isn't haunted per se, some strange things have still happened. Like floating blue lights in one corner that fascinated my late cat Bear, and a music box that had never been wound, suddenly starting to play music and stopping when I scolded it. Also, Bear, he's still around too from time to time, usually when I'm stressed or upset about something. I also have had 3 dreams that predicted the future, with payoffs ranging from a few hours after waking up to a few months out to almost 10 years later. And that's not even touching on the weird UFOs. So, yeah, it's been a lifelong thing for me. Update 5/17/2024 by Oogerooger. This is actually starting to scare me. My morbid curiosity is getting me afraid. I'll probably not poke the bear for a bit. I went to Ledges State Park in Boone, about 10 minutes from where I'm living. The forest, if not sliced by Highway 30, is the same one that Mick Hose lives in. Same forest I see weird shit in. I went there tonight. Less for spooky cryptid stuff, more for camera gear testing stuff. I bought an old Sony f717. It's a camera that can easily work as a cheap night vision camera. I wanted to test it out. Lower Ledges, the area of the park you can drive through, is one way. My wife and I parked at Flood Pole parking lot and walked back into the park in the opposite way traffic flows. We made it to that stone bridge that everyone takes pictures of, and my wife attempted magnet fishing. This was around 9 p.m. The sun was setting. Around 5 minutes after that, I get the feeling that we should start walking back to the car, but at a slow pace so we can continue taking photos. Around 9:30, it's black night outside now. No remnant of sunlight. We are 1 water crossing away from the bridge that leads to the parking lot. Maybe a 5-minute walk back to the car, and we were joking about not feeling afraid and how this is fun. We both hear the same thing. I'm not fucking joking about this. I'm not going to post this on any subs. I don't care if people don't read it or don't want to believe me. I don't want to believe me. I'm getting scared. We both hear, in a little boy's voice, "Help, I want my daddy." This was repeated 4 times at different intervals. It didn't sound normal at all. Every word was broken. The pitch was constantly changing and inconsistent. The volume changed with every word. It sounded like whatever was trying to make this sound was straining, trying to mimic the voice of a boy. I don't know how else to describe that. I'm good with words. I know that wasn't actually a little boy. It sounded sinister. It gave us chills. We started hurrying back to the car. The whole way back, we hear the increasing volume of tree branches and twigs, grass and leaves being broken and crunched as something moved through the trees very, very fast. Deer started running out of the tree line toward the road like they were running from something. I drove straight home. I'm exhausted and going to bed. Terrifying Experience in Muskoka, Ontario, by Erin. I'm one of those people that tear up a bit when talking about something truly terrifying. I'm tearing up while remembering this experience now. I had a close and dear friend years ago. We went to high school together and instantly became close as we enjoyed the same everything: movies, games, activities, and so on. This friend had a beautiful cottage in Muskoka, which was about an hour and a bit from the area we lived in. They would talk about it a bunch, saying how awesome it was to go there in the summer as it was right on a river and was perfect for swimming and paddleboarding. They also said it was kind of haunted, just passing comments about how it was spooky, how they'd hear things at night, how it was probably home to a ghost. They always said this jokingly, like it was no big deal, so we'd usually laugh at the idea that their beautiful and pretty much newly built cottage was actually a ghost house. Fast forward a couple of years, and they invite me out to their cottage in October. The family was going up, and my friend asked if I could come with. I was super excited to go because I'd never really been to Muskoka, and I knew how beautiful it could be, especially in the fall. And also how often my friend mentioned the fun they'd have at the cottage. I want to now preface what comes next with the fact that I have never had any paranormal stuff happen to me, ever. I don't disbelieve it, and never have, but I've never been in a position where I'd feel like, okay, this is definitely paranormal stuff, until this event. We get to where the cottage is located in this small community called Matthiasville. As soon as we enter, I get this weird feeling, like a shadow had been cast. It was a beautiful, sunny day with good vibes all the way up until we crossed the bridge that led into the community. The weather had turned overcast, but it wasn't that. There was a heavy and weird energy. We're driving along the riverside for some time. I tell my friend about the energy feeling, to which they say, "Oh, I know. It's weird, right? Like, heavy." Things lighten up, however, when we arrive at the cottage. This place was absolutely beautiful. New build, 3 floors, big deck on the second floor, and tons of windows that went floor to ceiling. It overlooked the river, and it had a forest trail at the back. The trail was way too thick with brush and wood to even try navigating, so we spent a lot of our time out by the water and on the big deck, chilling. We'd drive into the nearest town, Bracebridge, for some outings, and at night, we dedicated our time to beating the Call of Duty World at War campaign, split screen. It was an absolute blast. We went for a long day walk, too, and saw some of the interesting points of Matthiasville, a big dam, and beyond that, a strange and small graveyard that was situated on a slight hill at the very tip end of the community. All of the graves were old, and some of them were unmarked. Others you couldn't even make out what the stones had written on them. It was eerie, but nothing out of the ordinary happened for the first 2 nights we spent there. On the third and last night, the dad had to head home early for some work stuff, so it was just my friend, their mom, and myself hanging out for the night. The mom was sleeping in the loft, way, way up on the 3rd floor, and we made the basement floor our home for the weekend. We decided to watch a movie and eat snacks, but when that was finished, I suggested we go out for a night walk, since it was a clear night with a big moon out, and I loved going for night strolls. Plus, we hadn't really been out and about after dark, and the place was pretty beautiful at night, too. My friend was really against this. They said the place was spooky enough during the day, let alone at night. I managed to convince them, and out we went. We were walking along the road that went along the river, towards the dam and the end of the community where the graveyard was. We made it about a quarter way when my friend stopped dead in their tracks. I looked back to see what was up, and they were just standing there. They looked defensive. I asked what was up, and they said, "We need to go back, like now. This feels weird, and I don't like it at all." I asked if they were scared, like if they heard an animal or something. As soon as I asked that, we heard a deep and loud cracking and snapping of wood in the dense forest above us, on a rocky ridge that was beside the road, opposite side of the river. I looked up to where we heard it, and it felt like everything hushed. Crickets and all other nighttime sounds seemed to have just stopped. My friend quietly said my name. I looked back at them, and then suddenly, the bushes and shrubs underneath the ridge on the side of the road exploded, as if something huge jumped in them and thrashed around. This made us bolt, and I remember just saying, "Run," as I followed behind my friend. We ran, nonstop, straight to the basement door of the cottage. We got there in minutes, but it felt like seconds. We ran straight into the basement bedroom, and both hopped into the bed. I remember saying it was likely a coyote or a raccoon or something. As soon as I said those words, a creaking started forming up above us in the living area of the 1st floor. The creaking soon turned into slow, heavy footsteps, back and forth, and loud, as if someone was wearing work boots or something. I remember my friend, through tears, saying, "Does that sound like a coyote to you?" I cannot even describe the absolute feeling of dread that washed over me, like there's something up there taunting us. We lay in complete silence for what felt like hours. We got into the bed around 3 a.m. after our walk, which turned into a run, and the footsteps didn't stop for an hour or so. I remember finally falling asleep at 6 a.m. When we woke up, the first thing we did was, of course, ask the mom if she had been awake last night around 3 a.m. She wasn't. She hadn't even gotten up once to use the bathroom, she said. Even if she did, we would have heard her door open, and then the footsteps down the loft stairs. Everything was open concept on the 1st floor, so it was easy to hear things going on. We packed up and left. My friend's parents sold the cottage a couple of years later. I don't think any of them went back once after that weekend. I was curious about the area afterwards, so I did some Googling and learned that there was once a sawmill or something like that, and a tragic accident happened. I believe the owner's son drowned or had a bad accident in the mill, something tragic like that. I want to say that could be a factor here, but who knows? All I know is that night I heard heavy, clear, and loud footsteps pacing around above us on the first floor. That was my first and only paranormal experience, and I'll never forget it. Houses on a Graveyard by Elegant Ad 2603. So, some backstory. In Texas, there's a suburb that is just outside of Houston that was built in the 70s over an 1800s graveyard. They pretty much removed the gravestones, but didn't move the bodies. So as time passes and the community gets bigger, they keep finding graves. The most recent graves that were found were about 2 to 3 years ago, and if you go into the forest heading to the lake, you may find a gravestone or two. This is a story of a few of the experiences I've had living here, and FYI, this will be a lengthy post. So anyways, I had no knowledge of this when I bought my first home in 2019 in this community. We were so excited, and I don't know if the real estate agent knew the history of the land or not, so it wasn't mentioned to us. We actually lived there a full year before we started having our first experiences. When my wife got pregnant in 2020, we were so excited. It was our first, and so we were outfitting my baby's nursery. On this particular day, I was just about to build the crib. I had just picked up the heavy box from inside the garage. I went to open the door while struggling to reach for the door handle. Suddenly, the door flew open out of my hands, and due to this, I was expecting to see my wife on the other side of the door. But she wasn't. She was in the nursery. What made this even more weird is that the door was a heavy door, one that would close under its own weight, and it wasn't a windy day. At this time, I thought it was strange, but really thought nothing of it. The second experience we had in the house actually involves my wife. I was taking a shower and relaxing after a hard day's work. She had gone into the kitchen and started to cook dinner as I showered. She suddenly burst into the bathroom, and she claimed that she saw a shadow heading to the nursery and assumed it was me. She said she started talking and thought it was odd I didn't reply, and looked over and saw no one was there. We would have things move time to time, but thought we were forgetful and had moved them. But both of us never remembered moving the item. It wasn't till I bought a second house in the same community and went to rent out the first house that I learned the history of the community. A guy looking at the house told me what he knew of the graveyard, and after the conversation with him, I became curious and started researching, even finding an Unsolved Mysteries episode about the community and the experiences the first people of the community had, as well as all of the lawsuits that happened. For those wondering, the buyers of the homes lost the cases due to the fact that the graveyard was considered abandoned when the developer took over. So there was no liability on them, or so if I understand what I read correctly. Skipping to the next house, it started activity immediately. At this point in time, I have a 6-month-old and a toddler. My wife, myself, and the toddler were in the living room. My newborn was sleeping in the master. Suddenly, and with me and my wife both present to see it, a playpen ball flew out of our master and hit the wall. We both tried to figure how that could have happened. We looked at our air conditioning, or if a toy was nearby that could have launched the ball. Nothing. We couldn't explain how the ball was thrown that hard against the wall. The weirdest thing happens at 3 a.m. without fail. My 2-year-old daughter, who is autistic, wakes and wants to sleep with us. Sometimes she seems like she's scared. Sometimes she seems like she's normal. Now, I don't know if this is learned behavior or something more, but I feel it's worth noting. Time and again, we think we see shadows and dark masses. My wife says she feels uncomfortable in the kitchen. I feel like I see things out of the corner of my eye. Now, to be forward, I won't call this paranormal because this could be my own paranoia and makes me question if the small things I see are just in my head. And if this really is what we speculate, it doesn't seem malicious. I'll update this if something major ever happens. If you've made it this far, thanks for reading. Story number 1 by Sean. My story takes place when I was in kindergarten, about 5 or 6 years old, I would guess. I'll preface my story by explaining a little about my family's life situation at the time. We didn't have a lot of money. My mom worked 2 jobs, and my dad had a full-time job when he was in college, working on his nursing degree. Because they were so busy, my sister and I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother, Granny, and her husband, Jim, who took care of us while my parents were out grinding the American dream. Since we spent so much time together, we became very close to them, and I specifically became close to Jim. Though he wasn't my biological grandfather, he still treated me like I was his grandson. Better even, if I'm being honest. More like a son. We did a lot together, and I was pretty attached to him. Unfortunately, at some point during my kindergarten year, Jim had a heart attack. My only real memory of the day it happened was the whole family in the parking lot of the hospital, waiting for news on how he was doing. It sounds like an odd place to wait, but it was the early 90s and everyone still smoked. Sadly, we didn't have to wait long before we got the sad news that he had passed away. Here is where the weird part of the story begins. It's evident now that his death had a big effect on me. The events that followed that night I had completely pushed out of my memories until about 5 or so years ago, when it came up in conversation during a family get-together. It was a very stomach-dropping memory unlock moment for me, with all of the events flooding back into my mind. As it turns out, my mental state after his death was very depressed. I would randomly start crying and asking for Jim. I missed him a lot, apparently. My parents figured it would pass with time, as most things do. But things got weird for me. And this part I still don't actually remember completely, but my parents said they would be woken up by me laughing out in the hallways of our house or just talking sometimes. When they asked me what I was doing out of bed, I would tell them, Jim woke me up so we could play together. For a few weeks, apparently not every night, but often, the same thing would happen. They would wake up and find me playing in the halls with Jim in the early hours of the morning. It didn't take long before my parents made use of my school counselor, and these are the memories that are very vivid now that it was brought back up. I would spend probably an hour or so each day with her talking about Jim and my feelings. I remember trying to express how I felt while using one of those old-school sand zen gardens that you run the little rakes through, or some other small fidgety toy to help keep me calm while we spoke about it. This probably persisted for about 2 or 3 months if I had to guess, but I can't be sure. I suppose it worked, talking it all out with the counselor. Maybe too well, since I was able to purge it from my memory for 20+ years. To this day, I keep a piece of him with me always. My granny passed his wedding ring on to me when I was older, as I was the closest thing to a son that he had. So I wear it with pride and love as a memento to him. Still, though, since I've remembered it all, it has me wondering, if it was all just an odd, extreme coping mechanism, or if there is such a thing as ghosts or maybe angels. Was it all in my head, or were we that close that Jim didn't want me to feel how I was feeling, so he wanted to help me through it? Who knows? The Poop Ghost in the Woods by Nicholas Kaminski. Early in my career, I taught music at a private school in New Jersey. One of my favorite things to do when I worked there was to go on field trips. I always signed up to chaperone them. One trip that I insisted on going on every year was for the 6th graders in September to a camp in the woods in Connecticut. The camp was all about sustainability and had great farm-to-table food, plus there was hiking and kayaking. Really a great time. However, it was also most of these kids' first time sleeping away from home. Some took the opportunity for unsupervised mischief at night. Some brought out the tears and begged to be brought home. My last year there, I was staying in a cabin I had not been in before. The layout of the small building was 4 bedrooms arranged in a square, each with an entrance door to the outside wraparound porch, and each with their own bathroom. There was also a heavy door with an old-school iron slide lock conjoining my bedroom with one other. The cabin was pretty old, and I remember being surprised that I didn't sense any spirits in my room. It felt remarkably unoccupied. So we had our first day of activities and sent the kids to bed. I had a pair of known troublemakers in other bedrooms of my cabin, but I didn't have any problems with them at night. However, the next morning, I went to wake everyone up, and the boys in the room that happens to connect to mine, I kept the heavy bolt locked on my side, complained of not being able to sleep because the boys in the room next to them wouldn't quit banging on their bathroom wall at night. Of course, that was the room with the troublemakers, so I admonished them for being annoying, but they swore they didn't do it. The kids who couldn't sleep were very upset, though, so I didn't believe the troublemakers. Later on in the early evening, the kids were on a long hike with the camp staff, and us chaperones were given a few hours off. The science teacher and guidance counselor went to the main lodge to watch some movie, while I was feeling a little sleepy, so I went back to my cabin, about a quarter mile through the woods from the lodge, to take a nap. When I got to the cabin, I heard an alarm going off. Realizing it was in the adjoining room to mine, the room where the kids couldn't sleep, I knew I wouldn't be able to nap with that going off, so I opened their door to turn it off. As soon as I entered the room, the alarm immediately stopped. I was also met with some of the most oppressive energy I've ever felt. The room was way darker than mine, and also way colder. The rooms didn't have individual thermostats either. That was controlled for the whole cabin. This room was bad news. I closed the door and walked around the porch to my blissfully pure room and take off my jeans to get into bed. Though before I settle in all the way for my nap, I decide to poop. I go to my bathroom, and right as I was about to sit down on the toilet, a very large black spider crawls over the seat and then under it. I immediately flipped the seat up to kill it, but it was just gone. Thinking that maybe I just missed it crawling under the rim of the bowl and not wanting to find out where it had gone mid-poop, I decided to just use the bathroom in the adjoining bedroom. The kids were going to be out for hours. I was fine. Being lazy and not wanting to put my pants back on, I decided to use the heavy door with the iron slide lock to get into their bedroom instead of walking across the porch. The door was heavy and old. It hung a bit against the lock. I had to lean against the door to give the lock room to slide. Once it was open, I stepped into the familiar dark and cold bedroom with the bad vibes and went to its bathroom to poop. As soon as I sit down on the toilet, I hear a banging on the wall behind me. My first reaction is to get mad at my troublemaker students because here they are having lied to me about banging on the wall, and now I've caught them. But then I remember they aren't here. They're up on the side of a mountain on a 5-hour hike. I am alone in the cabin. Or so I thought. I start to try to find a rational explanation for the banging. It only started when I sat down, so maybe the pipes in the toilet are loose and move around when you sit. So I wiggle about, trying to correlate any of my movements with the bangs I'm still hearing. Nothing. The bangs were definitely not connected to anything I was doing. That's when I put it all together. This was the banging on the bathroom wall that the kids were complaining about. The alarm clock and spider seemed to both lure me into this other room. The coldness, the darkness, the oppressive energy. There was something malevolent in this room, and it wanted me there. And before I managed to actually poop, I run from the bathroom, through the heavy door, back into my room, and go to close the slide lock. To do so, I need to press all of my weight on the door. That's when something on the other side of the door pushes it so hard, I'm knocked back. This is again while I was putting all of my weight against it. I was not a small man at the time, either. I was 5'11", 260 pounds. I panic. My shoulder hurts from the force of the push, but I manage to slam the door shut, get the lock slid back into place, and run out the front door of my bedroom, grabbing my shoes and jeans in the process. I whip them on in the porch and then sprint back to the lodge. Out of breath, I meet up with the science teacher and guidance counselor and tell them everything that happened. Frustratingly, the guidance counselor doesn't believe me, but the science teacher does. Either way, I stay with them until the kids get back from their hike. We have our closing program for the day, and I lead my group through the woods back to the cabin. I, of course, do not mention the thing that pushed me to the kids, but I do apologize to the troublemakers for admonishing them in the morning. I know it wasn't you, I say. They look at me a little puzzled. I don't know if a teacher ever admitted they were wrong to them before just saying, "Okay, Mr. Kaminski, thanks," and go to bed. Once I'm sure all of them are safely in their rooms, or as safe as they might be, I settled into my room. I'm a little uneasy, but I feel like maybe this room is a safe place. Whatever resides in this cabin in the woods is confined to that dark room on the other side of the wall. But not wanting to be alone in that moment, I call my girlfriend to chat a bit before bed. I tell her the story about my shitty encounter that day, and she just laughs at me. She doesn't believe that kind of stuff, and she thought the image of me waddling away from a ghost with my pants around my ankles was truly hilarious. I remind her that I wasn't wearing pants at the time, but that doesn't stop her laughing, and it's honestly contagious. It was nice to laugh about something that had scared me so much. However, maybe I shouldn't have acknowledged the spirit's existence aloud while on the phone in that room, because suddenly I watch as the wardrobe in the room has its doors flung open with a very loud bang. I'm frozen in place on the bed, just staring at the wardrobe, waiting for any more movement. The room is still. I hadn't placed anything in that wardrobe the entire weekend. Nothing fell out of it to open the doors like that. It was just empty. Terrified, I slept with the lights on that night. My Encounter with the Black Dog of Hanging Hills by Tristan Mason. Let me preface this story by stating this is one of the weirder experiences in my life because it's a shared one. I'm open to any natural explanations as I'm thinking it might be some shared psychological experience. This is the best explanation I could come up with. Anyway, here's the story. In Meriden, Connecticut, about 10 minutes outside of where I live, there exists a range of mountainous trap rock ridges called Hanging Hills. The easiest way to get up them is to park in a wooded, mountainous park called Hubbard Park and take a trail that starts with a slightly intimidating passenger bridge that crosses over the highway. I am afraid of heights, but always try to challenge myself by going hiking and putting myself in slightly uncomfortable situations to overcome my fears. In the spring of 2014, my wife, girlfriend at the time, and I decided to take our umpteenth hike up Hanging Hills to see Castle Craig, a stone tower that stood at the end of the main trail and overlooked the cliffs, the city of Meriden, and Quinnipiac Valley. For the umpteenth time, we launched into a discussion on the drive there about the legend of the Black Dog. I find ghost stories that have any shred of historical reality to them intriguing because most representations of ghosts on TV or social media these days involve people becoming easily scared by shaking or noises in an abandoned location. The legend of the Black Dog is an exception because it involves the legend itself and a story of two geologists from the late 1800s encountering it and actually documenting it. The legend has it that you see the Black Dog of Hanging Hills once for joy, twice for sorrow, and 3 times for death. There are plenty of legends of black dogs and folklore that tell a similar tale. The two geologists, W.H.C. Pynchon and Herbert Marshall, were conducting research of the area in the winter of 1891 when they encountered the Black Dog. According to the story, Pynchon had seen it once and Herbert twice before. Herbert didn't believe in the legend. After ascending the hills again alone, Herbert supposedly fell to his death. I remembered the image of the Black Dog from W.H.C. Pynchon's story very clearly every time we hiked up the mountain. This time was no different. That particular day, my girlfriend and I encountered a hiker on the trail that was letting his black dog, without a collar, roam loose. We weren't sure whether it was to mess with people or not. The dog wasn't like the one that was depicted in Pynchon's story. Rather, it was bigger, like a lab terrier mix, and friendly, too. It came up to us and started panting at our legs. "Sorry about that," the hiker said as he caught up to the dog and us. "Not at all. I bet you love having a little legend with you around here." "Oh, yeah, the ghost dog," the hiker said, forcing a laugh and grimacing as if he had heard that one too many times before. As he walked away, my girlfriend made a comment about my obsession with the stupid dog and not wanting to hear about it. We made our way to the Castle Craig about 20 minutes later. Unlike the trails off the highway, the main trail from the park is not long or difficult other than a large hill at the end of it. We took pictures on top of the tower and by the cliffside, not really thinking anymore about the Black Dog. We had made so many trips up to the tower and seen so many hikers with black dogs that the legend almost seemed like a joke at that point. "Want to take the main trail down or the road?" I asked as we finished up taking pictures and drinking whatever water and Gatorade we had left in our packs. "The road," she insisted. "We can see that river." The road leading up to Castle Craig is typically taken by cars and bikers. We sometimes hiked down it to catch a glimpse of the Quinnipiac River on the way back to the park. Despite it being a warm April day, there were very few cars and bikers on the way down. It was nice and quiet. About a quarter of a mile into our walk, my girlfriend tugged me on the shoulder and pointed to a figure on the side of the road between some shrubbery. It stood about 10 feet ahead of us. "What the hell is that?" she said. I took a step forward, but she tugged on my shirt and shook her head. "Is that what I nodded. All I could do was nod. The figure was small and resembled a black dog with floppy ears and a hot dog tail, much like the one in Pin-chan's illustration. I wouldn't have thought much of it if not for the fact the figure was blurry. It wasn't the distance between us that made it blurry, and there weren't any fog-related conditions that day. It was almost as if Mother Nature had taken the dog in a Photoshop program and used the blur effect on it. Even when I took a step closer, to my girlfriend's hesitance, it still looked blurry. We were frozen otherwise, though, and didn't think to take a picture of the figure. There was an unknowing understanding between us that we shouldn't approach and just wait for it to cross. As the figure crossed the road, it didn't look at us. It just dawdled with its nose to the ground. For the rest of the hike, we were silent. We both knew what we saw, but couldn't put it into words. It was only after a while that I said I should have taken a picture, but deep down, I felt it was a good thing that I didn't. Seeing the figure wasn't frightening, but it wasn't pleasant either. We have been back to Hanging Hills many times since. We never encountered any luck or sorrow, just a memory of a little blurry black dog and an understanding that when you see an actual paranormal entity with someone else and understand what it is, there isn't really a question about it. I've read many stories posted online since about the black dog. Few have described what we saw, though. Black dogs run loose in the park all the time, and a number of the encounters we read about seem like fabrications or just encounters with stray dogs. If you live in the area or have a similar story, I'd be very interested in hearing yours as well. I haven't met or spoken with a person who has a similar experience. I also haven't been able to objectively rule out what I saw. I'm open to any scientific explanations on collectively seeing blurry figures in a shared experience. It would be disappointing, but interesting, to know about a more logical explanation, too. Story number 2 by Taylor. I was sitting on my bed, staring into the abyss, questioning, wondering, pleading, when I would wake up from this nightmare. It was late, probably 1 a.m., and I had just gotten home from my grandma's house. Most of my family was there. It wasn't the typical Sunday at Granny's. Nope. This is one I would go on to hate the rest of my life. One day earlier, I was 17 and a week into my junior year of high school. Life was great. I had a great group of friends. On my second year on the dance team, my best friend just got her car, and I had 2 classes with Landon Miller, and it was blatantly obvious the crush was mutual. I woke up earlier than I normally would have after a football game. We would all go to IHOP after the game, and I would just get home sometime the next morning. When I woke up, I had a missed call and text from Jake. Jake is my younger cousin. He was only 12, but always seemed older and more mature than he was. I guess that happens naturally when your mom, my aunt, is not a stable figure in your life. Jake never knew his dad, and none of our family did either. Jake and I were incredibly close. He and his mom lived with us on several times through his 12 years, sometimes for a week and sometimes for months. I always looked at him as a little brother. I didn't call him back right away, but read the message that said, "Ask your dad if he'll take us boarding tomorrow." My parents had a boat, their only redeeming quality, and I learned to water ski before I could write my name. By third grade, I was wakeboarding and never looked back. Jake picked it up quickly, too, and we would spend weekends on the lake and hours being pulled around attempting X Games maneuvers and crash landing into the boat's wake. Those are memories I will cherish for eternity. I wanted to respond to him with, "You ask him, he pissed me off again last night," as my dad usually did. But I also remembered Landon mentioned a last hurrah pool party that I definitely did not want to miss. But I said, "Okay, yeah, let me ask." I figured I could fit in both. I didn't ask until that night, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Because I didn't ask until later, Jake and his friends made plans to go ride their dirt bikes at Folsom Park. It was out in the middle of nowhere and barely an excuse for a park, just some unkempt dirt piles. The draw for Folsom was that there was a path to off-road, which is what most people did. They went off-road so far they ended up on a random county road. Jake was going uphill, throttle down, and when he reached the top, he was struck by an F-150 truck going 75 miles an hour. I was told they rushed him to the emergency room, but would later find out that he was killed instantly. His lungs filled with blood, and he drowned inside his own body, an occurrence known as pulmonary edema. I don't remember much of what happened between being told Jake was being care-flighted to the hospital, a brief 10 minutes of being at my granny's house, and the moment I was staring into the abyss, sitting on the corner of my bed, looking at an area of my room that was filled with Jake. The corner by the TV, where we set up a fake music video set and recreated the Mambo No. 5 music video. The beanbag chair that he sat in while I covered him and the entire chair with our Beanie Babies, 132 to be exact, where you could only see his head. No sign of the chair or his body, just an optical illusion of sorts. My shelf, with a stereo on it, we sat next to for hours one summer waiting for Who Let the Dogs Out to play, or to be the 10th caller and win coveted Britney Spears tickets. The window we watched fireworks out of the summer my mom had surgery and we couldn't go watch them IRL. Above that window, hanging from the ceiling, was a gold metallic star about as thick as cardboard and 12 inches in diameter. It had a hole punched in the top with a black curly-cued ribbon dangling around the star. I had received this when I made the dance team, saying my name on one side and 0304 new member on the other. This is how we found out I made it. They turned over the new member side to reveal the names. It was in that moment, as I watched, that the star began blowing dramatically out of nowhere, as if the window had opened, followed by a forceful gust of wind. But I hadn't moved from the corner of my bed. I didn't even feel like I was breathing, much less opening a window. The star then went from dramatically being tossed around to moving just an inch or two, side to side. I felt the air turn cold around me, then a pressure around my arms. And then I knew Jake had come to tell me goodbye. Ghost Outside My Door by Daddyo. I was living in a mobile home with a friend of mine in 2001. I had moved in within the last few months. My room was in the back of the home at the end of a hallway. My friend usually went out on weekends and didn't get home until late. But when he did get home, he would almost always walk back and knock on my door to see if I was up so he could tell me about his outing. One Saturday night, I was in my room watching TV and didn't feel like talking because I was really into what I was watching. So when I heard the door open and footsteps in the kitchen, I made up my mind to pause what I was watching and just stay quiet and act like I was already asleep when he came back and knocked on the door. After a minute or so, I heard him walking down the hallway towards my room, so I just sat still, waiting for him to knock. When the footsteps stopped outside the door, I could hear him breathing, but there was no knock. I figured he was just standing there listening for me to make a sound, indicating that I was still awake, so he could knock and tell me about his night. But he just stood outside the door, breathing for about a minute until the sound of breathing stopped. I was expecting to hear him walk back to the living room and turn on the TV, as usual, but there was nothing. No sound at all. I was beginning to get a little spooked at this point. Either he was still standing outside the door, being as quiet as he could, or I had just heard something terrifying. After 5 minutes or so of no sound, I finally got the courage to open the door and find out what was going on. As soon as I opened the door, I noticed that he wasn't there. There were no lights on and no indication that he was there at all. I looked out to see if his car was there, and it wasn't. I knew it was impossible for him to go back out and leave without me hearing him, so now I could feel my heart pounding. I went back to my room and closed the door. I was no longer concerned with the program I was watching. Instead, I was just waiting for him to get home so I could find out if he somehow managed to leave again without me hearing him. That was the only logical explanation for what I heard. But when he finally did arrive, he told me he was still more than an hour's drive from home when this happened. I had a few more strange experiences in the home before I moved out, but this was the first and scariest of them all. The Man on the Path by T.J. Hodder, creator and narrator for Tapes of Trepidation. Throughout my life, I've had several encounters that I can only explain as paranormal. I was never a firm believer in such things until I was older. I guess I always thought things needed an explanation. However, when you experience strange things that you just cannot logically explain, no matter how hard you try, it makes you a believer. At least, it sure as hell did for me. Now, most of my encounters that are significant happened in my early 20s while working in a small shop in an older building, stories for another time, perhaps. However, these experiences weren't the first time I had what I can only rationally explain as a paranormal encounter. I had 2 before, and I'd like to share one with you that left me very shaken, to say the least. I grew up in a rural community just outside of a small town. My childhood home was pretty close to a major highway that was just through a forest behind my house. The forest was large enough that we didn't really get much of the noise, but it was a small enough forest you could walk through it in about 2 hours. Also close to my house on this highway was a large rest stop area for truck drivers and travelers. It was a place a lot of young people started out their working careers at, myself included, at the age of 17. Luckily for me, there was a back road that acted as an emergency access road for the building that led to the rest stop just down the road from me. I was able to walk to work all the time without any issues. You'd walk down the back road and could continue past the access gate to a nature park area of sorts and then be at the building. Alternatively, you could cut across a path about halfway down the back road that led through the forest to the building. It was once a maintenance access road that had since been abandoned and overgrown. I always took the path to work. It cut at least 10 minutes off my walk, and I walked down it a few dozen times since I was a kid. However, I never walked down it at night. My parents always picked me up since there wasn't a lot of lights along the main back road aside from the occasional porch light. It wasn't so much that they were worried about my safety, but that they didn't want me coming across a skunk or some wild animal of the night, which was a real possibility where I lived. I didn't mind. Who wants to walk home after a long shift anyway? One night, I ended up working much later than normal, so I told my parents not to wait up. Walking home wouldn't hurt me anyway, right? Around 2:45 a.m., I set out to begin my walk down the overgrown, abandoned path I had walked down dozens of times. It was dark, but a fear of the dark has never been my thing. Unfortunately, for me, my iPod had died, and this was a little ways before smartphones. All I had was the sounds of the surrounding woods to keep me company. The moon was incredibly bright that night. It almost felt like I was walking during the day, not that I was complaining. I didn't have to worry about accidentally stumbling into any critters now unless they jumped out from the shadows, of course. As I walked deeper down the path and closer to the edge of the forest, I suddenly started to get a rather uneasy feeling. I'd never felt anything like it before. It made the hair on my arms start to rise, and I felt the wrong kind of butterflies in my stomach. It felt as if I was being watched. A few seconds after this feeling hit me, I noticed that the surrounding forest had grown quiet, which made me feel even more uneasy. I picked up the pace. I was only a couple minutes from the main back road. I'd be fine, I just kept telling myself. My worry was that a coyote was stalking me in the dark, which was rare but not unheard of in our area of rural southern Ontario, Canada. It turned out, though, it wasn't an animal watching me. As I saw lights from a car drive by in the distance on the road, I let out a sigh of relief. For some reason, that made me feel better. Until I heard a voice yell from behind me, clear as day. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I spun around, startled more than I'd care to admit, and saw a man standing in the distance by the tree line of an area I had walked past. After taking a second to settle myself down, I just responded with, "Sorry, I'm just heading home. I work at the rest stop," I yelled back in my most polite tone. The man in the distance seemed to be scowling, from what I could see, and was giving off a very negative energy. Clearly, he was pissed off. He moved towards me a little and yelled at me again. "You can't just walk through here. This is my goddamn land." I was super confused. The township owned this area, at least to my knowledge. I tried to apologize and said I was just cutting through and would leave right away. He just kept yelling at me and mumbling about this being his land, and he was sick of people not respecting that. For a second, I was a little concerned for the guy. He was elderly, his clothes were ratty, and his mumbling became more incoherent near the end of our exchange. I quickly took several steps towards him to ask if he was okay, and I noticed he looked pale, like really pale, unnaturally so, nothing like I had ever seen before. After a few more steps, I stopped in my tracks. The man looked at me, still mumbling to himself, but as I looked closer at him, I noticed his mouth wasn't moving at all. He was just staring at me with an expression of pure malcontent. This is when I realized something that made me turn around and run faster than I ever had in my life. The man was definitely standing. Hell, he was taller than me by a bit, and I'm about 6 foot. He was out in the open, no grass or bushes were obscuring him, so when I got even closer and could see his whole body without any shadows, I realized I didn't see any legs under his body. This man was just floating there, staring at me. I didn't think. I just turned and ran faster than I ever had in my life. I turned around to see if he was chasing me, but he was gone. It had only been a few seconds. No normal human being would have been fast enough to leave my field of vision that quickly, even if he had run into the forest. I would have seen him, or at the very least, still see the trees moving. He was gone, with no trace. I kept running, got to the main road, and collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily from the run, but also from fear. I couldn't rationalize what I had just experienced, and truth be told, I didn't want to. That night, and for several nights after, the man haunted my dreams. He'd never say a word. He would just stare at me with that same look of pure disdain and malcontent on his face. After a few nights, the nightmares randomly stopped. I was grateful for that. I never told my parents about what happened, or anyone else for that matter, really. I kept replaying it in my head over and over again. I know I really had seen and interacted with this man, but his skin, not seeing his legs? Was it a trick of the light? I don't think so. Do I believe a man had moved into the woods or was lost? No. The authoritative way he spoke, he knew where he was and what he was doing. It was the sort of tone that had a strong purpose behind it. I did walk down that path again, but only during the day and never alone. I didn't have any encounters like that again, but I also didn't go looking for anything to happen either. Some people I worked with said they always felt weird walking down that road at night too, but they never had any encounters like that, although they were never on that road as late as I was. What do I think happened that night? The only answer I've been able to come up with is I believe that area must have once been the man's property, and he feels the need to watch over it. It's well known that people's energy can be tied to a location, and the fact that it was around 3 a.m., I'm sure that was a coincidence, but it is when the path between this plane and the next opens, after all. It makes sense to me, and it's what I've told myself to make peace with it. If that's the case, I don't blame the guy for yelling at me or scaring me the way he did. After all, who wants random people walking through their yard? Haunted Barn by Daddyo. It was the end of the school year, 1980. After that weekend, there were only 3 days of school left till summer vacation. My brothers and I had spent the last few weeks making our new barn into our own playhouse. We had a ping pong and a pool table set up, as well as a room with a card table and a dartboard. My friend was staying overnight with me that night to have fun in the new playhouse. Our plan was to stay up all night, going back and forth between games and activities. It was around midnight, and we were playing cards at the card table and talking about anything and everything, when out of nowhere, we hear banging on the wall beside us. We both looked over to the source at the same time. There was a door to the outside that was opening about 3 to 4 inches and slamming over and over. It was loud and kept going for almost a minute. When it stopped, my friend and I looked at each other with a look of terror on our faces. We got up and ran for the door like it was a race to see who could get out of there the fastest. We went into the house to find that everyone was sitting in the living room watching Saturday Night Live. My mom and stepdad swore that no one had gone outside. I was trying to debunk what had just happened as a prank by one of my brothers. When that didn't work out, I grabbed a flashlight and we went back out to see what was outside the door. I thought we might find tracks or some evidence that someone was out there. When we got to the outside of the door, we noticed a concrete post leaning against it, holding it shut. I had forgotten about that at the time. It wasn't possible for that door to be opened more than an inch. My heart pounded in my chest after seeing this and realizing it couldn't have been done by someone outside pranking us. My friend and I both ran back to the house as fast as we could, and he called his mom to come pick him up. He was too scared to stay the rest of the night. That barn was the most terrifying and active place I ever experienced in my life. One of my older brother's friends was hit on the side of his head by a brick that flew out of nowhere at one of his barn parties. Fortunately, the guy was not seriously injured, but he never came back to one of my brother's barn parties after that. This particular event of the door slamming was truly scary, but the absolute most terrifying event that ever happened to me was in that barn, and I will post that story another time. Spooky Experience in a Motel in Washington State by Anonymous. Sorry, this'll be a long one. There's a TLDR at the end. For starters, this experience took place way back in 2015. I was talking to a friend of mine recently and mentioned this story, and he convinced me to post this here. I don't use Reddit and rarely ever talk about this, so I'm by no means seeking any sort of attention or points. Chances are I probably won't even see any replies or anything. I just wanted to tell my story. Also note, I've had sleep paralysis before, and this was not that. I was still able to move and grab my phone. In 2015, I was a college student outside of Seattle, Washington. A few friends of mine wanted to go on a spring break trip to Ocean Shores, a small town on the coast of Washington State. Because we were broke college kids at the time, we decided to book the cheapest place in town, a small motel called Westerly Motel. We were a party of 5 people, 3 guys including me, and 2 girls. We were all just friends and bros, so we didn't care about everybody sharing the same room. Arriving at the Westerly Motel, everything was fine. The place had a living room, bathroom, and small bedroom. It was pretty small overall, but hey, we got what we paid for. It was agreed that the 2 girls would get the bedroom and us 3 guys would sleep in the living room area. We were there for 3 nights total. The trip itself was fine. There wasn't much to do in Ocean Shores. Our original plan was to see the ocean and beach, but when we got there, it had all this really smelly and gross stuff washed up ashore. A local told us it was actually fish or whale carcasses. I have no idea how legit that was, but the stuff was definitely not seaweed, and it smelled horrible. The first 2 nights were completely normal. We all played board games and drank alcohol. It wasn't until the last night that my experience happened. My 2 male friends slept on the couch and chair, no idea how he was even able to sleep, and I was the only person sleeping on the floor. At around 4 a.m., I woke up. I didn't physically get up, but just opened my eyes. I remember reaching my arm over to grab my phone, seeing the time and thinking, fuck, I wish it was sunrise already. Because the atmosphere was super spooky. It's hard to describe. The air felt stuffy and cold. I know this phrase gets overused, but it literally felt like someone was watching me. The closest thing I can compare it to is actually a video game about ghosts called Fatal Frame 2. Throughout the game, there are certain rooms that have a high-pitched sound, indicating there's something in there for you to interact with. It gives you a sense of something is here. I know that's a weird comparison, but it gives the most accurate feeling I've ever felt to that night in the motel room. I tried going back to sleep, but felt so paranoid and scared that I couldn't. I remember my feet were actually shaking because I was so scared. I tried coughing a little to signal to my buddies on the couch, like, "Hey, are you guys awake?" But no response. The weird thing was that I somehow could just instinctively tell that the source of all this fear was coming from the bathroom. I was closest to the bathroom because I slept on the ground. Like, I could just feel that something was not right about the bathroom, and it scared the crap out of me, even though I couldn't see anything. It also felt dangerous to move, like the universe was saying, "Don't get up, don't move, just go back to sleep. You're not supposed to be awake right now." That's literally what it felt like. Thankfully, after about 15 minutes or so, I was able to fall asleep. The next morning, everything was pretty much normal. As my friend and I were checking out of the motel, I wanted to ask the front desk, "Hey, is this place haunted or something?" But chose not to. On the 3 to 4 hour drive back to Seattle, I casually said to my friends, "Hey, were you guys awake this morning?" And to my surprise, my friend actually said something like, "At 4 or 5 a.m.? I said, "Yes." Then my friend said, "Yes." Weirdly enough, it got quiet, and we both just knew to leave the conversation at that. It was pretty awkward, but that was literally it. I could tell that he also experienced what I felt at 4 a.m., and just like me, he didn't want to talk about it. It felt sort of cursed to talk about it, honestly. That was the end of that experience. But fast forward to 2020 during COVID, I was bored and stuck at home, and that Ocean Shores trip came back to mind. I was curious and just Googled Ocean Shores Westerly Motel, and the first thing that came up was actually a Como 4 News article written in 2014. The article states that in 2014, at that exact motel we stayed at, there was a man who locked himself in the bathroom in a standoff against police. He started a fire and died of smoke inhalation in the bathroom before being taken to the hospital or something. You can find the article itself if you just Google KOMO News Westerly Motel. When I read that, it scared the hell out of me, because I remembered that night and I remember sensing something in that bathroom. I would definitely consider myself a skeptic, but that night felt very supernatural. Like you could just feel it in the air, that this is not normal. Before that, I used to snicker at anyone saying they felt watched, but now I get it. I was looking at reviews of Westerly Motel and was secretly hoping someone else had a similar experience, but alas, nothing. But yeah, just wanted to share this story. The motel is actually still around, so if by chance anybody else experienced something like this, just know that you're not alone. TLDR. Went on a trip with college friends to a crappy motel. On the third night, felt something supernatural coming from the bathroom. Found out many years later that a crazy guy died in that bathroom in a standoff against police 1 year prior to my trip there. Article can be found if you Google KOMO News Westerly Motel. A Night Shift in Radiology by Josh Turner. I worked in the radiology department in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer before getting a promotion working in medicine. During these 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray or inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Nights always seemed the craziest. One time, a patient came in with armed police after an altercation which involved a knife in the middle of the city center, and just so happened the person he had the altercation with was having an X-ray too. This caused a second altercation right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and then a wheelchair. So I have seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many bonkers. But this one night, something scary. I would start a night shift about 1900, then would work till 8:30 the next morning. This was the standard night shift for our department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before doing 4 days off. After the 3rd night, you were ready to sleep for a week. The strange thing was this was my first night of the 3, so not tired at all. It started off normal. I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, logged into my PC. During this time, we usually would set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or the latest TV series, as there would be a lot of downtime between patients. Like I said, the first few hours, nothing that interesting, just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. Then it came to my break. Now, before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. This hospital is the largest in Wales. It's a teaching hospital, and it's pretty old. Now, the best way to get from A to B in this hospital is through what we call the tunnels, or the catacombs. These consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors. So it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night. But it's the quickest way to get places if you're staff. There's always been rumors and mumblings of strange things happening in these tunnels. Some people say they saw ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say they've seen shadows following them from the corner of their eyes. But one person has claimed they were attacked by a person wearing an old nurse's uniform from the 70s. This place is creepy, even at the best of times. But for me, never really fazed me. I've been down there hundreds of times before, and the worst experience up to this point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste on my head. That in itself was a horror show. But tonight would be something altogether different, and maybe not even of this physical world. Like I said before, very quiet night. I had been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek. A radiographer, or radiology technician for my American friends out there, came to take over and cover for me for my break. I decided to go to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, a multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it was one of the most peaceful places in the hospital, but to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which would usually take about 15 minutes, scanned my keycard on the main entrance to the tunnels, then proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like someone was walking behind me. It being a busy hospital and basically the tunnels acted like a highway, I didn't think anything of it. Suddenly, I heard panting, like someone was trying to catch their breath after going for an intense run. So I turned around to check and saw nothing. A bit strange, but I thought it was nothing. Maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or a generator pumping. So I carried on walking, but I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me and was walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn towards the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels that I have never been before, littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture, and equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe older, just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit, and dusty corridor. This was starting to really creep me out because in all of the confusion, I realized I was lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest and could feel the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down a corridor trying to find a signpost or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me got stronger. Suddenly, I felt something hit my arm in force, almost like someone using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulled myself across the floor towards the cold, dusty wall, and looked around frantically, trying to find an explanation to what the heck just hit me. Then something caught my eye. It was almost like a black mist with glowing red eyes. It was about 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I got back up and sprinted. I ran down what it felt like 100 different corridors until I found a janitor. He asked me what was wrong because I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" This was the last time I ever stepped foot in the tunnels. To this day, I hear rumors of strange things. I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe it was something. Why else would the janitor ask me if I had seen it too? What else is down there? Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. I won't be going to find out. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Another Terrifying Experience in the Barn by Daddyo. You couldn't ask for a more beautiful spring day, 1984. I had just started as a drummer in a school rock band. The night before, my older brother and two friends of ours were practicing our new songs in the barn. I was really excited that they said I could be their drummer. I was just dying to get back to practicing that day. The only problem with that was the drum set was in the barn and no one else was home. I normally wouldn't even think about going in that barn alone because of the strange and terrifying things that would happen in there, and especially when there was no one home. But because I was so excited about getting back to practice, I decided to go ahead and go in. I had a plan to go in the front door that was close to the drum set. If anything weird happened, I could get out of there fast. That was the plan, anyway. When I got to the door and tried to open it, I noticed that it was off the track and could only open about 5 to 6 inches. That's all right, I thought. I can squeeze through here. So with a bit of effort, I managed to squeeze myself in. It took some time, though. Great, now I can get to practice. And practice I did for at least an hour or so. Then I did a rim shot on the snare drum a little too hard and the drum head just split open. Now I'm frustrated, to say the least. I threw a tantrum, so to speak, by throwing a drumstick. It flew up to the haymow on the other side of the barn. I watched it bounce into the back addition upstairs. I calmed down pretty quick since I came to the realization that I have to go up there and get it. But practicing was over till I got a new drumhead anyway. So I moved the hi-hat out of the way and began to walk toward the ladder to retrieve the drumstick. I looked up toward where the drumstick landed, and it was flying right towards my head. I had to move out of the way or it would hit me. Now remember, I was alone in there. It hit the wall behind me, making a loud noise that startled me on top of already being terrified by the flying drumstick. Without hesitation, I went straight to the door. I forgot that I had to squeeze in. I was just terrified and wanted out, but I was going to have to take the time to squeeze back out. While doing so, I mistakenly looked over at the drum set. The bass drum mallet that is foot-operated went down like someone had stepped on it. Seeing this move by itself was bad enough, but it also hit the drum hard enough that I could feel it in my chest. I actually thought that my heart had stopped. I was so scared that I forced myself through the door, tearing my clothes up and putting big scratches on my back and chest. Once I was out, I ran toward the house about 15 or 20 feet, then just collapsed. We never practiced in that barn again. Not because of what happened to me, but because the lead guitarist bumped into someone or something in the dark the night before when we got done practicing. There was nobody there, and he knew it. He told my mom about it a few days later. He wouldn't even go in to get his equipment. My brother and I had to go get it for him. This drumstick event was without a doubt the most terrifying I've ever had in my life. I always considered that barn beyond haunted and into the realm of evil. Story number 1. Hiking the Appalachian Mountains at Night by Anonymous. I joined this group to tell you about a paranormal experience I had while unintentionally hiking in the Appalachian Mountain region. A couple months ago, my friend and I had a spontaneous idea to hike at sunset and eat Subway on the beach. We went to a place called Morse Mountain. We walked the trail for about an hour, and right when we got to the beach, it was just about pitch black outside. We hadn't thought to bring anything but some weed and Subway. No flashlights or headlamps or hiking shoes. Dumb idea, I know. Anyway, all was well for the 2 hours we laid on the beach, smoking and eating and talking about life. It was beautiful hearing the waves and seeing a sky full of stars. I started getting tired, so I decided we should head back out. We gathered our stuff and started walking, and both turned on our phone flashlights to guide our way. Not even a minute into the trail, we hear something moving in the forest to our left. I tell my friend to stop, and the sound stops. Immediately when we start walking again, the swishing is there, and it's matching the exact pace we are walking. So we stop again, just to test if the sound is really matching our pace. I was hoping that it was an animal just curious about who we were and would walk away. But the sound, once again, stopped when we stopped. At this point, my heart starts pounding because there's no animal that I know of that is intelligent enough to match the exact pace and exact stops we're making. My friend and I turn our flashlights to the left where the sound is coming from, and I make eye contact with something in the distance that was pale and had dead black eyes and looked like it was standing on its hind legs with terrible posture. My friend and I quickly turn our flashlight to point directly in front of us, and I say, "Please tell me that was an animal. Was it?" And my friend, in a very monotone voice, says, "No, we need to leave. Keep your eyes forward." For the rest of the hike, the trees and branches looked like symbols, and some even like nooses. I felt the forest was telling us to leave, or at least communicating some danger to us. After about an hour, we finally made it back to the car, and I asked my friend if they noticed anything about the trees, and they also described the symbols. My friend called their mom on the drive home, and she said, "I'm just happy you weren't in the Appalachians." The next morning, my friend calls me and just says, "We are idiots. We were in the Appalachians last night." I haven't been able to stop thinking about what we saw that night. I also want to add that my friend and I did not smoke much and are both stoners, so we don't chalk it up to the weed. Any ideas of what I experienced? Story number 2. Entered a Time Loop by Anonymous. About 10 years ago, right before I moved away for college, I went to a concert in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my then boyfriend and 2 friends. We lived in Chicago, so we would frequently drive the hour or so to go to an EDM venue there on weekends. This specific time, I drove us there after class on Friday. We got there around 6 or 7 p.m. and left the venue around 11 or 11:30 p.m. Friday night. For a few reasons, broke and young with questionable fake IDs mostly, we decided to opt out of getting a hotel room, even though we had for past visits, so it is strange that we didn't, thinking back, and decided instead to take a nap in my car before driving back to Chicago. Unfortunately, there wasn't exactly a safe spot in this area of Milwaukee to sleep in a parked car at midnight. I realize how absolutely stupid this whole idea was, but I want to recount it accurately. So, we decided I would drive the first half, we would switch places at a gas station halfway through, and my then boyfriend would drive the second half. We decided this after about 1 or 2 hours of trying to make sleeping in the car work. Probably sometime around 2 or 3 a.m. is when we started to head back. After a few switches back and forth and a gas station stop, we made it back to Chicago and parked right outside of my then boyfriend, let's call him Matt's, apartment building, probably around 3:30 to 4:30 a.m. Saturday early morning. We, all 4 of us, Matt in the driver's seat at this point, me in the passenger seat, and our 2 friends in the back, spent probably around 30 to 45 minutes in front of Matt's apartment building, just looking at and sharing photos and videos we took at the concert with each other. While we were all watching a video on my phone, Matt's mom knocked on the window and scared us, as it was still almost completely dark out. Matt's mom worked nights, so she usually got home around 5 or 6 a.m., so it looked like she was just getting off work. She asked us how the concert and drive was and said we were probably exhausted and hungry, and we said we were. She then asked why we decided to stay in the car for that long, and Matt told her we were just looking at pictures and videos from the concert, no big deal. To which she replied, "Did it really take you 2 full days to look at pictures and videos?" We asked her what she meant by that, and she said, "Yeah, you guys have been out here for 2 days. It's Sunday evening." All of us freaked out and started asking a million questions to her and to each other. Why did she not say something sooner? She said she noticed our car there when she left for work Saturday night, but didn't see if we were in it or not and assumed we just parked there and went to my house or one of our friends' houses, and only decided to check to see when my car was still there while she was leaving for work the next day. How did my car still have gas? My car had about 3/4 of a tank at this point, having filled up about 45 minutes outside of Chicago. This was probably the most confusing part to me. I don't know how a car, running full blast AC and idling with the engine on, would not run out of a drop of gas in that amount of time. Could we have all fallen asleep? The fact that there were 4 of us, all independent of each other, makes it hard for me to believe we all fell asleep for 2 full days without ever waking up, deciding to maybe go inside Matt's house or maybe go home. Our 2 friends also had their cars parked at Matt's, so if they were that tired, they could have gotten in their own cars and left. No one used the bathroom, ate, or drank water. Not sure how that worked. I didn't receive a single text or call from my parents. Granted, they didn't exactly hover over me, obviously, but 2 days? Our 2 friends left after we all collectively asked Matt's mom clarifying questions and got sufficiently confused and freaked out. And Matt and I drove to my parents' house 15-ish minutes away. At this point, it was about 9:30 or 10 p.m. Sunday night. We tried to explain to my parents and they didn't believe me. I think they thought I was trying to lie about where I was. Not that it mattered, obviously. All 4 of us were so scared by this event, we never brought it up. Looking back, I sincerely have no idea how this happened. Not sure if we entered a time loop or something of the sort. I would love some insight on this, as I still think about it all the time and fight the urge to call those 3 people to make sure I'm not the only one still thinking about it. Anyone have similar stories or any ideas as to what might have caused this? Story number 1, by Jinxie. I will preface this by saying, every time I tell this story, I get goosebumps, even 23 years later. I think I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I was at my older cousin's house for a visit during the summer. It was going well until the second night. Before I get to the happening, I need to try and describe the house. The house is situated in a rural area outside of Chilliwack, British Columbia, surrounded by cornfields and a small property that housed an abandoned home directly behind. The house itself I would describe as a modern plantation-style home with a ground-level wraparound balcony. When you look at the house from the road, the glass-paned doors is in the center with your living room window to the left and the bedroom I was staying in to the right. When entering the home from the front door, there's a large staircase directly in front of you. It is an open staircase that allows you to see the walking area upstairs. There are 4 bedrooms on each corner of the upstairs, and the bathroom is in the center. After a day of play in the field behind the house, my cousins and I ate dinner, watched a movie, and headed to bed. I was the only person sleeping on the main floor. I can't remember what time it was, but I was jarred awake by this heavy feeling that someone was watching me. I remember being tucked into the wall under the window, and so when I awoke, I looked up towards the window. And that's when I saw a figure standing there outside. All of a sudden, there was a rap, rap, rap on the window, and I freaked out and pulled the blanket over my head. Silence. But then the rapping came at the back of the house, the kitchen sliding door. There's a washroom attached to the main floor bedroom, so I ran into there and hid in the bathtub. That's when the banging at the window started again, but it wasn't exclusive to my window. This person or thing was banging on every window in the house, and it was moving around the house way too fast to be human. I don't know why no one else in the house couldn't hear this, so I decided to make my way to the upstairs to try and wake someone. When the thing started knocking at the back of the house, I sprinted for the stairs. And this is where I freaked out the most. As I was halfway up the stairs, the most ear-shattering banging on the front door glass happened. I looked behind me as soon as I made my way up the stairs, and this thing was just a shadow, just standing there, but the banging was prominent. I got to my cousin Rachel's room and shook her awake, crying. We laid in bed, listening after I explained what happened. And we heard nothing. Was I crazy? She told me to go to sleep, and she fell back asleep herself, but I just could not. And then it happened again, but this time, it was just a small tap, tap, tap on the front door, just enough for me to hear it, as if to say, "You're the only one that can hear me." We never figured out what it was. I told my aunt, and she couldn't even explain it either. But I believe we stirred up something at that abandoned house. We never did go in, but we definitely tried. I took my fiancé to the house a few years ago when we were visiting family. We took each other to see the places we remember growing up in. It's still there. It's still creepy. As I recounted the many good memories and finally this story, the big willow tree in the front yard kind of moved. But there was no breeze at that moment, and that is when I knew that no matter how much time has passed, people are never forgotten. Story number 2, First Paranormal Encounter by Ted. I've had many paranormal encounters, starting from my teenage years, intensifying in my early adulthood, and seemingly tapering off now that I'm in my late 30s. The first experience that I remember was in 9th grade, coming home from school. My parents were both working, so usually I'm home by myself until late dinner. I usually get the rice started in the rice cooker and thaw the meats. This afternoon, I was extra tired from wrestling practice, so I was relieved when I came home and heard rustling in the kitchen and the faucet turning on and off. I didn't actually look in there to see who it was, but I assumed it was my mom because sometimes she'd get home early from her restaurant job. Sometimes they have private events and they'd send some waitstaff home. I turned the corner to the bedroom and yelled out to her, "Can you wake me up in like an hour? I wanted to study for a test tomorrow." I heard her say, in a raspy voice, "Okay, Con." Con is a Vietnamese term addressing your own child. I thought nothing of it. Maybe she's feeling a little sick. I woke up from the landline phone ringing. Cell phones in the early 2000s were available, but we were poor, so only the adults had them. It was my mom asking me if I wanted the leftover food from the restaurant. I told her, "Did you go back to the restaurant for leftover food?" She said, "No, she's been working the whole time." Chills ran down my back. It was twilight, and the sun was setting, so the whole house had an eerie semi-darkness to it. I told my mom to hurry up home, please. I did not lock my bedroom door so I could see out into the dark hallway. I jumped up to go lock the bedroom door and turned on the light, opened the window and turned on the radio, anything to drown out the silence and the dark. Eventually, my dad got home first. I was so relieved to see him, but didn't know if I should tell him what happened. I waited till dinner time to slip in casually that I thought Mom was home earlier and was doing something in the kitchen. She denied it, and they concluded that I must have imagined the whole thing. But I know I didn't. Someone was in the house, rustling in the kitchen, turning the faucet on and off, and imitated my mom's voice in its raspy voice. It called me Con, so my first thought was that it understood Vietnamese. No relatives we knew were going to come over, nor did they have the keys to the house. To this day, I still don't know what it was or how it mimicked my mom. It wasn't the only spooky thing that happened in that apartment, but it was the first and spookiest. The Anniversary Clock by Tim. I was 10 years old, watching TV with my older sister, who was in her early 20s, who would often babysit me while our mom was out of the house. It was just another benign evening when a small anniversary clock, a clock about 12 inches tall, all encased in glass, with a small brass fixture at the bottom, caught our attention. The clock had been in our family for years, and as long as I could remember, it never worked. The clock stayed on top of the TV as more of a decorative piece than anything, as were a number of other things, as this was in the 80s, where big, boxy TVs took up large spaces in the living room. Anyway, my sister and I were watching TV when suddenly we both noticed, simultaneously, that the hands on the clock started moving. Slowly at first, but accelerating quickly until it was hard to make out which hand was which. After about a minute watching the hands spin, bringing the clock back to life for the first time in decades, the hands came to a jolting stop. My sister, being the brave adult she was, examined the clock and found no batteries inside. It wasn't plugged in or anything, and both of us were totally mystified at what we both experienced. When our mother returned later that evening, we told her everything and were met with some skepticism, as one might expect, not having seen it themselves. The next day, my mother received a phone call from a distant relative. The call was to inform all of us that our great aunt, one that had been really close with my sister early in her childhood, had passed away the day before after a short illness. Saddened by the news, we also couldn't help but link the passing to the abnormal experience the night before. We asked our mother what time our aunt had passed the day before. She said 5:30 a.m. We raced over to the clock where there, clear as day, the hands stopped at exactly 5:30. In another circumstantial twist of fate, 15 years later, I would end up meeting my future wife on May 30th, 2005, or 5:30, and ended up getting married on May 30th, 2009, or 5:30. Ouija board in haunted childhood home by Daddyo. At the end of May 1987, while my parents were on vacation, I was taking care of the haunted house I had lived in from 1979 till 1985. By this time, the poltergeist activity had decreased to almost nothing, but I was still scared to be in the house alone, especially at night. I called a friend of mine and asked him if he would mind staying there with me when he could while my parents were gone. I had told him quite a few stories about the activity in that house and barn in the past, so I used the possibility of a paranormal encounter to lure him into staying. He, fortunately for him, had never experienced anything he would consider paranormal before, but was still interested and not skeptical, so he agreed to stay the night. While I was waiting for him to arrive, my brother called to see if I was going to be staying there that night so he could hang out with his friends. I confirmed that I was, and also told him I was having my friend over to possibly have his first paranormal experience. My brother thought that was a good idea, so he decided to mention that to his friends to see if they wanted to join for an experience of their own. One of his friends had a Ouija board and thought that was a great place to try it out, so they agreed. My brother arrived with his two friends first, and we walked around outside telling his friends about experiences we had there and in the barn. One of his friends was a skeptic, so he wasn't believing anything me and my brother were talking about. The other was like my friend. He hadn't experienced anything in his life, but still had an open mind. While we were talking, my friend finally arrived, so I went to his car to greet him. He had his girlfriend with him, so I asked if he was still planning on staying the night. He said yes, as long as his girlfriend could stay as well. I didn't mind as long as she was aware of my reason for having him stay. I told her that strange things may happen that night that might be scary to someone who has never had those experiences before. She was also a skeptic, so she agreed to stay, saying nothing was going to happen anyway. While my brother and his friends were still outside, I took my friend and his girlfriend upstairs to show him where they could sleep. After showing them, I started telling stories about the house to prepare them for what could possibly happen during the night. The only thing I was expecting would happen was the attic door would shake and make noise like it had done almost every night while I was living there. We went into the attic so I could show them what was in there, while still talking about past experiences in the house and barn. There was a stack of old encyclopedias on the floor that was in disarray, with one on the floor. I picked up the one from the floor and placed it on top of the stack, and then straightened up the stack while finishing my stories of past experiences. Afterward, I went back downstairs to see what my brother was doing. My friend stayed upstairs with his girlfriend, so they could be alone. When I got downstairs, I saw they had already set up the Ouija board on the table and even had a few candles on the table around it. The table was in the dining room at the bottom of the stairs. I closed the stairway door and sat down in the empty chair in front of me, facing away from the door. My brother and his two friends were already sitting in the other chairs. We lit the candles, put our fingers on the planchette, and began asking questions. The planchette was moving with all our hands on it, answering our questions. I wasn't moving it, but I did think someone in our group was. I didn't believe Ouija boards were anything more than a novelty. While playing with the board, we heard someone walking on the stairs, which caused all four of us to look at the stairway door. I didn't think anything of it since my friend and his girlfriend were still upstairs. I just figured they were coming down. But after a little time, he hadn't opened the door. So I opened the door and saw he wasn't there. I then went up and asked him if he had gone down the stairs, and he told me that him and his girlfriend hadn't moved from the couch they were sitting on. He told me that he thought one of us was coming upstairs because they heard it also. 6 people heard someone walking on the stairs when there was no one on the stairs. My brother's skeptical friend was getting really spooked after that. We had to convince him not to just leave. His other friend was intrigued, like it was the coolest thing he'd experienced up to that point. My brother and I were used to that sort of thing, so it didn't faze us at all. After convincing his friend to stay, we went back to playing with the Ouija board. It was answering questions again, and I still thought somebody was moving the planchette. Then the intrigued friend asked whatever was answering to put out one of the candles. Within 5 seconds, one of the candles just burned out. There was no moving air in the room, plus all the other candles were still burning without any motion indicating moving air. The spooked, skeptical friend screamed and started running for the door, still screaming. The other friend followed him, and my brother after that. I shouldn't have been, but I was laughing at the guy's reaction. Even though it was spooky, I never expected a big guy like him to scream like that. I went outside to find my brother's friends getting into the car to leave. I said we can't stop without saying goodbye on the Ouija board, just in case the superstition is true. My brother's friends were not willing to go back in the house, though. So my brother and I went in and said the goodbye. They left right after that, without the Ouija board. I went back inside and blew out the remaining candles. Then I went upstairs to tell my friend and his girlfriend what just happened, since I knew they had to have heard the screaming. We sat upstairs talking until nighttime. Nothing happened until after midnight, when the attic door began moving. Like I mentioned before, this was a usual occurrence in that house, so I was used to it. My friend's girlfriend was getting really scared by this, though. She didn't believe things like this could happen, and here it was, happening. It took a bit of convincing to get her to stay, but she did at that point. The attic door was shaking and making noise the whole time. After a bit of time, there was a loud noise that came from inside the attic that sounded like something being dragged across the floor. Then the sound of knocking from within. Once again, we had to talk his girlfriend into not leaving, even while the door rattling and knocking was still going on. After a few minutes, there was a loud thud that sounded like someone had dropped a book flat onto the wooden floor. That was it for his girlfriend. There was no talking her into staying now. She ran downstairs with us right behind her. She told my friend she would be back to pick him up in the morning, and she left. We went back inside and slept downstairs. When we got up, I just had to look in the attic to see where that loud noise came from. When I looked in, the first thing I noticed was the stack of encyclopedias was no longer straightened up, and the one I picked up was right back on the floor. I can't say for sure if any of this was brought on by the Ouija board, but that was more occurrences in one day witnessed by more people than there had ever been in that house before. The TV Ghost by Truly Spooky on TikTok. I'm going to call this one the TV Ghost. This one occurred the summer that my sister Amy, who was a few years older, was allowed to have an hour added onto her bedtime. And I thought it was completely unfair. I was told to go to bed at my regular bedtime, and I threw a complete tantrum. And to be honest, I didn't want to be upstairs alone. So I was put to bed, throwing a fit, and I cried myself to sleep. I woke up sometime later, but I didn't realize how much time had passed. I heard the TV on downstairs, though. I was still so mad that even though all the lights were off, I walked downstairs wanting to catch my sister just taking advantage of her new bedtime. I traversed the entire house, the house that I've been telling you about, in the dark. The only light that was on was the one fluorescent light over the kitchen sink that was allowed to remain on. But as I approached the living room, I could see the glow of the TV, and I could hear the TV on. As I got to the doorway of the living room, I got there just in time to see the TV turn off, but I made out the silhouette of a kid sitting on the living room floor, looking towards the television. I knew it was late at night, but I was still so mad at my sister, and I yelled at her. I said, "I got you. You're busted. You're going to be in so much trouble. You're going to lose your new bedtime privileges." And she didn't answer me back. So I just stood there, yelling in the dark. "I saw you. I saw that you had the TV on. I know it's you, Amy." My mom comes down, asking me why I was up in the middle of the night screaming. And I'm trying to explain to her, I caught her watching TV. My mom flips the lights on. We're completely alone. It's somewhere around 3 to 4 in the morning, and I kept explaining to my mom, "I saw a kid sitting there. I saw a kid sitting in front of the TV." She walked me back upstairs and put me back in my bed, and I saw Amy in her own bed. So who was actually downstairs watching TV in the middle of the night? I guess ghosts don't observe bedtimes either. Stay spooky, friends. Visitors in Bedroom by Anonymous. So my mother is a very level-headed, rational person and has never had a belief in ghosts or the paranormal. She is not the kind of person to make a story like this up, so it has always deeply disturbed me because I wholeheartedly believe it happened exactly as she says. So when she was 17, still living in her parents' old house in Virginia, she was reading a book in her room on a school night. She said she remembers finishing the chapter of the book she was reading, thinking, that was a good chapter, then closing the book and putting it on her nightstand. The lamp by her bed was still on, and just as she was about to reach over to turn it off to get ready to go to sleep, there was a sheet of darkness that she describes as being thrown over her, almost like someone threw a blanket, but nothing was there physically. She jolted up and stood next to her bed, and slowly the darkness faded, and she could see her room again. But as she could slowly see more, she realized there were 3 figures in the room with her. One was next to the door, the other in the far left corner of the room, and the third sitting in a chair that was on the other side of the bed in the corner. They didn't speak, but my mom knew that they were there to take her away with them. It was almost telepathic, the way she describes it, and that she knew why they were there and what their intentions were. She was frozen for a minute, but then decided to try to run out of her room, which she did, out the door, down the stairs, and into the living room, which was a straight shot from the bottom of the stairs. She was screaming at this point for her dad, and as she turned around, she saw the 3 figures floating down the steps toward her. Just before the one in the front made it to the bottom, she heard her dad coming, and all of the figures vanished like smoke. Her dad was understandably disturbed, and my mom never slept in that room again until she moved out of the house. Anytime I've asked her to describe what those figures looked like to get more detail, many times over the years, she tells me the same thing, that they had a human form, but no details in the face or skin. They were translucent and foggy. Mama by Competitive Bad 5295. My husband of 25 years and I were laying in bed one night in the 2-story house he owned a few years prior to our marriage. It was after midnight, and the streets were barren, not uncommon for the area. A quiet neighborhood, no dramatic neighbors. As I lay there, I heard a disembodied child's voice, a soft voice, like a little girl would have, say, "Mama?" I laid there for only a minute when my husband and I simultaneously rolled over and faced each other. He said, "Did you just hear that?" I asked him, "What did you hear?" For validation, I wasn't losing my mind, and curiosity, I guess. I regretted asking him, to be honest. He said, "I heard a little girl say, 'Mama.'" We wouldn't have thought much about this, for I have a beautiful daughter who's now 26 from a previous but short marriage. But it couldn't possibly have been her, because she was with her dad over an hour away. We moved 3 years later. It is worth mentioning that in the 3 years we were in that house, we fought like madmen. I can chalk it up to newlywed arguments or whatever, but it got ugly. No physical violence, thankfully, but we had some dark days. I could never get warm in that house. The air felt heavy and cold. The house still stands, and the owners have given it a complete makeover. I wonder if they have experienced anything unusual. If you've made it this far, thanks. I'm definitely not an English major, and my sentence structure could use a makeover too. The First Encounters by Ted. I've had a fairly normal childhood. Growing up in Vietnam, emigrating to the U.S. when I was around 13. Everything was typical until my senior year in high school. I had just gotten back from wrestling practice and I was exhausted, so I dozed off to sleep. I usually had the radio alarm clock on next to me, so I fell asleep listening to music on the radio. I woke up suddenly, not knowing where I was. In my dazed state of mind, with my eyes still closed, I heard the song This Love by Maroon 5 coming from the radio. I remembered that I left the radio on when I went to sleep and realized that I was in my bed. I opened my eyes, and I could no longer hear the song. I was staring at the ceiling, and I was unable to move. If you've listened to many paranormal stories, you know that this was sleep paralysis. However, in 2007, this phenomenon was not very well known. Back to my motionless self. I was scared because I thought I was paralyzed. I yelled out, "Ma, Ma," for my mom, but I could only hear the sound in my head because my mouth wouldn't open. Exhausted, I closed my eyes for a moment and I heard, "This love has taken its toll on me. She said goodbye too many times before." I opened my eyes to look at the ceiling again and I couldn't hear the song anymore. I tried to move my body but couldn't. After what seemed like a half hour of struggling, I felt my legs and arms moving. I was sleeping on the edge of the bed and the thought of turning over to fall onto the floor, waking me up, was in my mind. I turned my body over, off the bed. I felt the sensation of falling, felt the shock of the thud as my back seemed to hit the floor. Then, silence. I opened my eyes and I was staring at the same part of the ceiling. I did not move. My body betrayed me and gave me the stimuli of falling without actually doing so. I tried again, and the same thing happened. I was stuck in a waking nightmare. After a few times, I finally woke up. I sat right up, my forehead and shirt damped with sweat. My heart was racing, and that was the first time I truly felt afraid. Things started to go wrong after that afternoon. One night, I had my first vivid or lucid dream. I was at home, but nobody else was there. The layout in the apartment that I lived in at the time was the same, but the furniture was different, older, dustier. I walked to the hallway across from my bedroom. There was a fallen mirror with a diagonal crack on it. I walked in front of it and saw the reflection of a Caucasian little boy with bowl-cut blonde hair and blue eyes. I said to myself, "This isn't real. I must be dreaming." Then I woke up. That was the first time I had a vivid dream, and it scared me tremendously. The next time I had a similar vivid dream, I was floating around the apartment. The furniture was also different from reality and from the previous lucid dream. I floated through the layout and through the sliding door in the kitchen into the backyard. I immediately came face to face with a darker-skinned Hispanic or Native American man. He didn't look scary or intimidating, but he said, "What are you doing in my house?" in a confused but loud voice. I woke up sweating, heart beating fast. What did it mean, I wonder? Was this his house? Did he used to live here? I didn't try to answer those questions and just went back to sleep and brushed it out of my mind. A few weeks went by without another incident. I was taking a shower, as usual. Suddenly, I felt someone watching me. I cleared off the shampoo from my face and looked out. Someone was in the bathroom, looking at me. I couldn't see clearly through the frosted bathtub door. It was a male figure in a light blue button-down shirt and tan slacks pulled up high past his belly, and a green hard hat like one of those hats people wear in the jungle. I slid the frosted door open, and there was no one there. I didn't even finish showering, just dried off and got out of there. I chalked it up to my imagination. That night, my dad told me that my grandpa, his dad, passed away in Vietnam. We turned on Yahoo Messenger, yes, I am that old, and saw part of the funeral procession on webcam. A few weeks later, we received a DVD from Vietnam. It was common to videotape the funeral and send it to loved ones, especially if they could not be there in person. There was a slideshow of my grandpa from when he was young to his last photo taken. I paused the DVD when I saw it. My grandpa, in his youth volunteer uniform, wearing a light blue button-down shirt, tan slacks, and a green, wide-brimmed hard hat. I counted the time of his passing, and it was a few minutes before he appeared in the bathroom. I didn't tell my parents any of this because they believed that we were Catholic and that God protected this house, and there couldn't possibly be anything paranormal happening in God's house. If there were, it would invalidate their religious beliefs, and they wouldn't have that. I did not process what happened to me and what I saw until much later, when I confronted my own sensitivities with the supernatural. Meanwhile, I pushed it back down into the depths of my memories and carried on. Madame Strangeways here. Thank you so much for joining me for so many spooky, scary, strange stories. I really can't stress enough just how much it means to me to hear from you. So leave me a comment. Let me know which was your favorite story. And there's plenty more stories where these came from. Please do me a huge, strange solid, would you? Just go ahead and if you haven't already, hit subscribe. And also like. And also tell your friends and foes to tune in. It would mean the world to me. The underworld, obviously. Each strange story is shared with the express permission of its author. If you have a true strange story you'd like to hear narrated, email me, madamestrangeways@gmail.com, or visit madamestrangeways.com. See you soon, she said, ominously. Oh, but wait, while I've got you, if you like listening to my voice, if this makes you kind of sleepy, if you like how calm and gentle and soothing it sounds, well, then you're going to have to check out my Patreon, patreon.com/madamestrangeways. Check it out, because I've got some guided meditations. So I would be absolutely flattered and not at all insulted if I put you to sleep. Okay, bye for real. Madame Strangeways out.